The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of Spaced Out Radio or Spaced Out Radio Limited is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised.
BUMBLEFOOT. BUMBLEFOOT.
Are you experienced?
Stop right there!
From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
They let us play with all our toys. They let us think that we're big boys. They let us make the louder noise, but women rule the world. They let us think we're Superman.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on iTunes and TuneIn. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. For you. I will stop till I reach the top just to be there with you.
Dave, oh Dave, are you playing with Bigfoot and aliens again?
Dad, you gotta stop haunting the ghost. It's scaring them.
All right, seriously, put down the pointy sticks.
Oh, the deeper I fall.
Okay! Game on! Game on! Game on!
The password is...
All right.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio. Mr. Bumblefoot, Dave is ready for liftoff.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you.
Seriously, Dave? Really? Aren't you a little old for a tinfoil hat?
Hello, Toby. Bye-bye. Love you. Bye-bye.
Please take your seat above all. We will be able to prepare for takeoff. Start. 2, 1. Boost ignition and lift off.
I'm such a lucky guy, 'cause after all this time, it's like the deeper I go, the deeper I fall. The deeper I go, the
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio. Tonight I am your host, Dave Scott. It's great to have you along for the ride on this Monday, September 11th, Tuesday, September 12th. If you're on the East Coast or across the pond. Hope you had a great day and night. We are live right here in the Great White North, on top of the mountains of central British Columbia, as we are here 7 days a week. We welcome in everyone listening in on our terrestrial stations. WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. Great to have you with us as well. We are also live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, spacedoutradio.com, Spreaker, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Like our music, get your horns up for Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy. Bumblefoot is the official sound of Spaced Out Radio. If you're a social media junkie like I am, give us a follow on Twitter, at Spaced Out Radio. How about on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Listen to us on iHeartRadio in the United States. TalkStream Live. You could tune us in on TuneIn and download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. Now, if you want to take part in this show, you got to do me a favor. You got to sign into one of the chat rooms, either on Rev Radio, Spreaker, on the UPRN chat room, or on Facebook at the SOR Space Travelers Club. Or if you're on Twitter, use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. I will get to your questions and comments in there as well. Now, if you head to our website for $5 a month, you can become a member of the SOR Space Travelers Club. And as of right now, shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. Pick up a t-shirt, posters, stickers. We also have the Encounter online, courtesy of our editors, Eric Markham and Everett Thiemer, talking about everything paranormal. You can check out my latest blog there as well. And if you've had an experience you can't explain, fill out an SOR Sightlines report. We also have great video footage from UFO seekers Tim Doyle, Leslie Mitchell Clark's Contact TV, and more. Can you believe it's already been 16 years since the events of 9/11 changed the landscapes of our lives and around the world? If I were to say to you, do you remember where you were? How easily could you tell me? Tonight, we are going to get into the controversy of this topic with author Albert Jack, who has done some great studying on the storylines of this horrific terrorist attack that claimed the lives of 2,977 people. These were innocent people, moms, dads, grandparents, brothers, sisters. And today, more than anything, we should be celebrating the lives of the people who needlessly died in the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and Shanksville. But 16 years later, there are still so many questions that don't add up. When 9/11 first happened, I'm positive that we all looked at this and felt, well, here comes World War III. And to think today we are still at war in the Middle East. We couldn't plan for this. We weren't prepared. But how could that be? 19 men with box cutters taking over 4 aircraft with retired military pilots at the helm of those airliners? There are so many questions that have gone unanswered. Maybe there wouldn't be so much conspiracy around this topic if it weren't for a couple of key factors. Why did Building 7 fall at free fall speed? Why was there nanothermite particles found in dust particles on both the World Trade Center wreckage and Building 7? Why is the hole at the Pentagon smaller than a Boeing 757? Why, in Shanksville, was there no wreckage at all? Remember, it's not just us conspiracy theorists who need the answers. More importantly, it's the families of the deceased, the 343 firemen, and the perished police officers who deserve to know the truth. So what is the truth? Albert Jack, welcome to our 9/11 anniversary show on Spaced Out Radio. How are you doing, my friend?
Good morning to you. Very well indeed, thank you. Well, it's certainly morning where I am.
Well, it's evening here, so I'm still, well, it's dark now, so I guess it's nighttime here in British Columbia. My friend, let's go back 16 years. Where were you when 9/11 occurred, and what were your first thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much the same as everybody else. I was at home near London and got a phone call or a message from somebody to say, hey, you better put the TV on. Like many people, I was watching the news of the first tower on fire. I don't know if you can imagine that helicopter shot where you can see the top of the first building with the smoke billowing out of it, and then all of a sudden the second one hit. Now, we all saw the second one hit live, didn't we? From behind. Can you imagine, can you visualize that shot I'm talking about from the helicopter?
Absolutely.
And I remember my thinking at the time, I just turned it on and I was watching this and I was thinking, I'm almost ashamed to admit, or not quite ashamed is probably the wrong word, but I was watching this thinking, wow, that's fantastic. You know, it was too amazing for me to think that it was real. And what I mean is I thought that I'd flicked onto a TV show that was showing us, I don't know, the graphics from the latest Steven Spielberg movie, and someone was, you know, running a trailer of the film. Do you understand what I mean? I couldn't compute that we were actually...
Yeah, I remember exactly what you're talking about, because I was the same way.
Yeah, I couldn't compute that the New York Tower, the Twin Towers, were actually under attack in the way that it subsequently turned out they were. It must have been, and this is the part I'm ashamed of, it must have been a good... It seemed like a long time, but maybe 2 or 3 minutes. And I'm sitting there thinking, this is brilliant. How do they do that? Fantastic. And then it kind of dawned on me a little bit, because I suppose the presenters weren't showing as much enthusiasm as I was. Hang on a minute. This is for real. Yeah, now it was a completely new set of thinking. But it is interesting to go back to those first thoughts. And I think it's something we should... try and encourage people always to do, and especially when there's these big events, these monumental events, is always go back to the first things you learn about these events, because the story certainly will change over the next days, weeks, months and years. Just remember what you saw and what you heard as it was happening is a very important, I think, part of the understanding how it all works process.
Mm-hmm. I remember my ex-wife waking me up. I had been working the night before, and I had worked the late shift, and she woke me up early, and she said, Dave, World War III has started.
Yeah.
And she goes, come downstairs to the television quick. And we sat there, and my stepdaughter, who was, I believe, in grade 2 or 3 at the time, and my little girl was there as well. No, she would have been in about grade 3 or 4. And my little girl was there. We actually held them out of... the oldest one out of school that day, and let her watch TV. Because, I mean, how rare is it that you see history being made right in front of you on live television? It's one of the only times. And being a reporter in Vancouver at that time, working in sports, I remember calling my news desk, and my boss says, I don't know what's going on right now. Everything's up in the air. You're on standby. So here I am, an hour out of Vancouver, waiting anxiously, and then our local football team, professional football team, the British Columbia Lions, were holding practice, and their practice field was right on the flight lines of Vancouver International Airport. And I remember, so I raced out there knowing that there were a couple of people on the team from New York and from Washington. Found out one of their relatives worked at the Pentagon, just happened to be off that day, and same as one of the players' family members worked at the Twin Towers and happened to be off that day as well, which was very, very thankful. And then I remember about halfway through the practice, all the players just stopped, and they looked up, because they were used to practicing under 737, 747, 757s, and 67s flying on over them over practice, and all of a sudden there was no airliners whatsoever. It was eerie. Very, very eerie. But the strangest story came for me after that happened. And I was sitting in the newsroom, and this is where they started to announce who was on the first flight, or some of the flights that crashed into the towers. And the Los Angeles Kings of the NHL had announced that 2 of their professional scouts, Mark Bavis and Garnet Ace Bailey, were on one of the flights that crashed into the towers and were killed. Wow. And so what I did was, being the journalist that I was, I called up the Vancouver Canucks director of amateur scouting, a gentleman named Ron Delorme. And I got about a 7-8 minute interview with him that I was then going to cut up into stories. And he was telling me all about Ace Bailey, how on the road, Ace would make turkey on Thanksgiving for Canadian Thanksgiving, and again on American Thanksgiving, and so on and so forth. And he would really take care of everybody. So after we completed the interview, I said, Ron, thank you so much for doing this on such a horrific day. And Ron says to me, Dave, I need to tell you something. And I said, what? He goes, I didn't know they were on the plane.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me and throughout my journalistic career, and still does. I will never forget that, because my heart just sunk, because I thought he knew. And here I was asking him for an interview, and Ron, being the pro that he is, allowed me the interview, and he didn't even know.
Until you told him?
Until I told him.
Wow.
It was heavy. Very, very heavy.
Yeah, it was one of those events that I think everybody has got a story, and everybody was touched by in some way, wasn't it? It was a truly extraordinary thing. Yeah.
When did you... Go ahead, Al.
I was just going to say, and this week is bringing it back home, isn't it? It's easy. Somehow things slip off into the memory, but then into the back of the memory. But then once a year, it comes back to the front, and we're having conversations like this, and we're reading about it, and your Facebook feed is full of it, and the Fox News or whatever news channel you're watching is full of stories about it. And still, the stories change every time. And this is one of the things. I don't know if I've just become too cynical, particularly after writing the book and reading through the 9/11 Commission report, but there's so much, I don't know, amateur investigation. I'm not sure that's completely fair. But for example, I was watching Fox News this morning, and they were rerunning old clips and talking through some anecdotal stories like we've just been doing. And I'm just sitting here thinking, no, it wasn't. No, it didn't. Why are you saying that? Haven't you read anything? Have you not read the report? Have you not read the official conclusions? So still the story's being changed and spun. I suppose it's a little bit like those Chinese whispers. The more times something's told, the little bit gets added on, a little bit gets taken away, and eventually the whole story changes. But you know what? That's what George Orwell wrote about in Animal Farm. That was exactly the message in Animal Farm, is how you have an initial story, you have an initial message from, in his case, the farm animals or the rulers of the farmyard, for example, and then every week, line by line, it changes until in 6 weeks or 6 months' time, it's a completely different story, and no one noticed. Mm-hmm. Nobody noticed the message changed because it was done word by word, line by line, week by week, and so on. And this is exactly what we're experiencing with events like 9/11 and others as well, but particularly that one. I think one of the reasons it is so vivid in our memory or in our psyche, if you like, is the footage of it. You know, there were worse events like Pearl Harbor, for example. Imagine if there'd been footage of that from 1941 or whenever the date of that, and other monumental events, actual footage that would be replayed and replayed time and time and time again. Certainly we'd know more about it. There'd be certainly more questions as well. You know, Pearl Harbor's another massive conspiracy theory.
When did you start to question the true nature of what 9/11 was? When did you start to think there's something wrong?
With the official story, or with the story that at that time the mainstream media were reporting? Very soon. Very soon. It was within days, if not sooner. I mean, I think possibly even when the towers actually started falling down live on my television set just outside London where I lived at the time. Sitting there watching, thinking, "Oh, hang on a minute. Hang on. Am I sure? Am I sure my original reaction wasn't correct in the first place? Am I sure I'm not watching some kind of very clever CGI special effects movie here? This doesn't look right at all." But I suppose they call it the red pill moment, don't they? Or many people are calling it the red pill moment these days. I suppose when I was absolutely certain was Building 7, reading about Building 7, which is the ultimate smoking gun and certainly doesn't fit with any, the evidence you see doesn't fit with that particular building, doesn't fit with any of the official versions. And you don't need to be an expert to understand this either. Perhaps we can talk through Building 7 at some length during the programme. But lawyers, don't they? They have this the saying. It's the if you have, let's say, a death. Let's say somebody's willed in front of you. You either see it yourself, or you hear about it, or it's fictional. There are only 4 ways that this person could have died. It's natural, accident, suicide, or homicide. NASH, they call it. It's murder. Now, if the person has got their hands cuffed behind their back, for example, and a bullet wound in the chest, then you know that that's not natural. You don't need to be an expert to know this. You don't need to be doing the autopsy, for example, or be a detective. You can also be pretty sure it's not accidental, and hands tied behind the back, fairly certain that's not suicide either. So, right, we know it's a homicide. Now, there are other questions. Why? Motive? Who? Of course, those things we don't know. This is true of Building 7. You know, there are still many things we don't yet know, but we can look at the events that happened on 9/11 at Building 7 and say, right, we know that this was not what the official version wants us to think it was. This building did not come down because the curtains were on fire. And we can go into detail why we know that, if you like. So there are things like that. But I suppose in answer to your direct question was the other one, the other one that's very, very well known, Flight 93 out at Shanksville, wasn't it, or out in Pennsylvania somewhere. Where was the plane? Every time somebody throws something at you and says, well, you know, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're a nut job, you're a this, you're a that, you know, you should believe the official version of events, studies have been done, far greater minds than mine have been working on this for many years. Yeah, all of that may be true. And I'll give you all of that. Now answer to me, where's the plane? And the version of the answers you receive range from sublime to bizarre. I mean, apparently it was marshy ground and it swallowed it up. Another version was it hit the ground so hard it vaporized completely. As somebody else reported, an expert, a so-called expert, who's about as much an expert as you and I in terms of the evidence they actually have on their desk, said that, yeah, well, there's a debris field, wasn't there? And the wind, you know, the plane broke up in the air and didn't hit the ground after all, and it drifted away on the wind. 8 kilometres. About several tons of titanium steel Rolls-Royce engines drifted 8 kilometres into another debris field miles away that no one was allowed to go and see. Now, you can believe that if you want. And I don't have the answers. I don't know what the answer is. I can tell you what I think happened, but it wasn't that. It certainly wasn't that. The plane didn't break. The plane didn't break up in the air and drift into a debris field 8 kilometres away. And I think seeing the photographs I mean, why they released them in the first place was bizarre, but I remember reading in the British newspapers the next day, and there was this photograph of this big hole in the ground which looked like somebody had emptied a skip into, and there was bits of paper and debris flying around, but there was no plane. Shouldn't there be one when there's been an air crash? Because when you start to think logically about many of these things, and you start to weigh up the evidence of 9/11 in all 4 cases, the Pentagon, the 2 Twin Towers, well, and Building 7, if you like, and the Flight 93 crash, there are only 4 occasions where there has been a plane accident, a plane crash in the history of aviation. This is since aviation began, since records began in the 1910s or 20s. There have only been 4 occasions where there's been an accident over land when the aircraft hasn't been found. We've all seen aircraft investigation. We all know, everybody knows, you don't have to be an expert. Everybody knows they have these big air hangars and they piece together the plane like a jigsaw and try and find where the fractures were or what happened. And they're trying, always the plane, almost in its entirety, in accidents over land, have been recovered and reassembled, except for 4 times, and all 4 occasions were on 9/11, 2001. All 4 occasions were Flight 93, 77 into the Pentagon, and the 2 into the Twin Towers. no evidence of the aircraft was ever found and reassembled and put back together, and black boxes weren't recovered, etc., etc. 4 times in the history of aviation, all on one day, all in one connected event.
Let's not.
Doesn't that make you suspicious?
Absolutely, but let's also not forget that it's the only time in history towers have fell due to fire. The only 3 towers to ever fall due to fire were on 9/11 as well. And,
that's right.
And the fact that I think if we look at, there's so many different ways to go, and I'm trying to keep control of this talk in regards to it, but looking at it and doing my studying for this show, one of the things that very much interested me was the fact that, number one, steel does not melt from jet fuel. Most of the jet fuel was burned off in the first explosion when the planes first hit the towers. But the second point was, under the Twin Towers, and mainly under Building 7, there was molten steel found. And whether it's the NIST report, the Popular Mechanics report, or whoever, they said that it was fire that melted the steel. Steel does not melt below, I believe it's 2,800 degrees. Jet fuel burns at 1,800. So there's 1,000 degrees. Now, a lot of people could say, okay, that's fine. The planes went in, weakened the structures of the Twin Towers, which caused a mega collapse at free fall speed when the floors kept on pancaking one another all the way down, and the weight is what caused it. I can understand that. I can believe that. But it all comes back to Building 7.
Well, I think what you mean is you can believe that if you have to, but it still comes back to Building 7.
Absolutely.
That's right. And I'll give you the Twin Tower. I'll give you so many things. I'm talking hypothetically here to the investigators or to the argument that I'm having with somebody, for example. I'll give you all of those things. And even what you, Dave, didn't mention was that, sure, World Trade Center 7 was brought down, they say, by fire. And we talk about the temperature that the aviation fuel has to burn at. We still don't believe that it's hot enough to burn the steel structure of the building. But then, no aviation fuel hit World Trade Center 7. There was no aviation. That was a normal fire. That was an office fire. They say it occurred because a piece of debris pierced the... trying to remember you'd have to read my book, 9/11 Conspiracy by Albert Jack, available at all good online stores and everywhere else. But in there, I explain what the official story or the official 9/11 Commission report tells us what happened. And I think it was a piece of debris penetrated the cellar, burst a diesel boiler, a diesel fuel boiler, and that created the fire. We're expected to believe that flame jumped 5 floors and set fire to the curtains in what was essentially a sealed building. This is the other thing about Building 7. I don't know when you want to start our analysis of this, but that particular building was home to some of the most fiercely protected departments or I don't know what you call them, bodies, if you like, that in the history of America. I mean, the US Department of Defense was in that building. FEMA were located in that building. The CIA were located in that building with their head office. The US Secret Service, the NSA, the Inland Revenue, the Tax Revenue, Securities and Exchange Commission, the New York Office of Emergency Management. They were all located in Building 7. This building was nuclear bomb-proof. This was built during or just after the Cold War period in the 1980s. Flame doesn't jump from a boiler 5 floors and set light to the curtains in a sealed room. This was anthrax protected. This was a sealed building. You know, you have to factor all of those things in too, and then say, did the fire actually melt the steel girders and bring it down in a controlled manner into its own footprint at real speed? It's too unbelievable. It's too extraordinary to overlook.
There were so many people, including firefighters, police officers, stating Building 7 that they had heard that they were going to bring it down. They didn't say who, they just heard they were going to bring it down. Larry Silverstein, a couple of days afterwards, being interviewed, who owned the lease of the World Trade Center buildings, said they had to bring it down. And yet, we're told by NIST, who did the official report on the collapse of Building 7, that stated there was no bombs bringing this building down. Now, when you have the owner of the building telling you we had to bring it down, it is on record, you could go on YouTube and check.
Yep.
The owner of the building telling you that they had to bring it down, that's all the evidence you need to see that the Building 7 is the lightning rod to what happened that day.
But even that I find very hard to believe. I mean, again, you have to just apply Occam's razor, shave away the unlikely, shave away the improbable. Even during a main event like this, imagine a local fire at your local Chinese restaurant. Imagine the building was on fire. Just for a minute, I'm asking all your listeners just to imagine that the building down the road, a couple of doors, go and look at one now out of the window. It's a business, doesn't matter how big it is, it's on fire. Okay? Now, this isn't the decision of the owner to have it demolished. Larry Silverstein was in no position to order for that building to be pulled, was his words. Let's pull it. That wasn't his decision to make. Especially given the tenants that were in that building at the time, given the tenants he had. You know, it was a government-occupied building. It wasn't his decision. He wouldn't be able to go to anybody. Who would he go to for a start and say, okay, demolish it? Notwithstanding the fact that it would take 2 or 3 weeks to rig the place with enough explosives to actually bring it down in such a controlled manner, not 2 or 3 minutes or even 20 or 30 minutes that we're expected to believe, that wasn't Silverstein's decision. I know that's what he said on TV. I've seen him saying it. The fire chief at the time, a guy called Daniel Nigro, N-I-G-R-O, Nigro, however that's pronounced, disputes that. He says that isn't true. He says, who's he going to tell to pull it down? Me? Well, I don't have the authority. This was the fire chief speaking. Who's he going to tell to pull it? Me? I don't have the authority to pull a building down that's filled with government documents and hard drives and paperwork and filing cabinets and God knows what else was in the Inland Revenue IRS Services building. So, again, look at the bigger picture and then go back to a single man, the owner, no matter how powerful he may be or however wealthy he is or whatever denomination he is. Much is made of Silverstein being Jewish. I don't know how important that is, if at all, other than through connections. But he can't go to the fire. Who's he going to go to the fire chief? Okay, pull it. The fire chief's going to say, well, pull what? What with? Send a bloke up there with a pickaxe? No, I can't do that. Who's he going to tell? Who does he give that order to? The mayor? Giuliani? What are you going to go to Giuliani and say, look, that fire looks dangerous, we better pull that bill? He's going to say, okay, well, he'll look around himself, look through his pockets, get his phone out and say, well, who does that? Whose job is that? None of this is acceptable. None of this is believable to have all happened within 15, 20 or 30 minutes if you follow the timeline of events on 9/11. Wasn't Silverstein's decision. He couldn't do that.
Do you think that he was tipped off that building was coming down?
Yeah, I do. I think Silverstein knew a lot more and would have to be talking about the Twin Towers. I'm not saying he's responsible. I'm not even sure if the man's still alive. I'm not saying he was responsible for the whole catastrophic events of that day. By any means, that would be crazy to even suggest. But certainly I think there were certainly quite a lot of people who knew in advance what was going on. I mean, and Building 7 is the big clue again. You know, it was clearly a controlled demolition. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay? There's nothing wrong with that. If the building was dangerous, or if there was a problem, or if it was listing, or they thought it might fall over into and damage other buildings, or there's nothing wrong with a controlled demolition of a dangerous building. But How do you rig it up inside 30 minutes with explosive that's going to... in fact, you mentioned YouTube and a Larry Silverstein interview. You can also see on YouTube, if you go looking for controlled demolition videos or clips or examples, almost everybody who's a real expert, a demolition expert, controlled demolition expert, explosives expert, will tell you that it will take 2 to 3 weeks to rig a building like that. And so once we've accepted that it was a controlled demolition and there's nothing wrong with that, sure, you've also got to accept that it was planned in advance. That's advanced knowledge. Must be. There's other examples of advanced knowledge as well. I think I remember speaking to you once before, and we'll come to the Twin Towers, but you mentioned the word eerie, there's a very eerie clip, and I remember it well, and I obviously saw it on YouTube, and I've probably saw it on national TV at the time. I'm not even sure if it's still available, but I know I've seen it, which adds to my own personal questioning of events. When the whole world is looking at this. The very first shot we talked about when I mentioned the helicopter and the first tower was on fire and the smoke billowing out of the top, and we saw the second plane come in. Well, there's another clip of the very same event, but it's from across the river. It's from far away, maybe 4 or 5 kilometers away, and there's somebody has set up a camera and they're filming the top of the World Trade Center. Now, this is not too surprising, is it? I mean, it's a big event. The top of the building is on fire. At that point, we all think it's a bomb. Everybody thinks it's a bomb. There's another person whose camera, and you can see the clip somewhere, is focused way off to the right. 10, 15 kilometers off to the right. Now, who does that? Into a clear blue sky, there's nothing there. And then suddenly this dark image of a plane comes into view, and this camera follows right into the second building. How suspicious is that? It tells us that somebody, whoever was operating that camera, was expecting something else. Who the hell does that when you're all fixed watching the New York World Trade Center Building 1, the first one, billowing smoke and a monumental event? It's like the pyramids are on fire and everyone's looking in a different direction. That's again suspicious. That's advanced knowledge. Somebody was expecting a second plane. Why? Who were they? Where did that clip come from?
I think one of the big things, going back to Building 7 here for a moment, was the fact that 23 minutes before the tower fell, the BBC Broadcasting was announcing that Building 7 had fallen. And in behind the reporter, there is a video of the New York skyline with Building 7 still standing, and then all of a sudden, miraculously, the feed went black. Everything went dead. Aaron Brown on CNN was stating that Building 7 had fallen minutes before it did. It was like they were handed a press release saying this has happened, but for some reason, if there was a controlled demolition on that tower, they delayed it and didn't let the media know about it. To me, that is, when I started looking into that, probably around 2011, I thought, you got to be kidding me. Journalists at that level, and me being a journalist, I'm not comparing myself to them, okay, but there is some etiquette. You read what's on the teleprompter. If anybody's seen the movie Anchorman with Will Ferrell, that story is so true. You read what is on that teleprompter. And the fact that they were reporting on 4 different news sites, the 2 majors being the BBC and CNN, reporting that Tower 7 had fallen, while live feeds of the skyline was being showed with Tower 7 still standing at 47 stories high, that says something, and that wasn't right. And that was my big tip-off around 2011 when I looked at it.
Yeah, well, it's evidence of advanced knowledge, isn't it? Again, it's evidence. I mean, it doesn't tell us anything else. I mean, the BBC, by the way, explained that by insisting that the live satellite feed from New York to London had been cut off, and so they were showing behind her old footage. That's how they explained it. They said the footage was taken an hour earlier, and that's why the building's still in shot. But it doesn't explain the time that's being shown on the screen, which is, as you say, before the building actually came down. The building came down, for example, I'm not sure of the exact times, but let's say the building came down at 5:25, then the time shown on the screen at the time that the reporter Jane Stanley was doing that report was 5:15. It was 10 minutes earlier. So the BBC have tried to explain it away by saying, yeah, well, the screen went blank, so we just looped it back half an hour and it was old footage. That doesn't explain the time, doesn't it? It doesn't explain the fact that there was advanced knowledge. And so, yeah, like for you, it was a big, as they say, red pill moment. It was that moment when you take the pill and you wake up and you think, hang on a minute, I don't know why this happened. This is probably too big for us to understand, or it's out of our league or whatever. But we know that the evidence doesn't add up. The evidence is inconsistent with what we're being told in the official version of events, which is the 9/11 Commission report. And there are multiple examples of that. You've just given one. We certainly know there was advanced evidence. We certainly, advanced knowledge, I beg your pardon. We certainly know that Building 7 was rigged to be demolished. Nothing wrong with that. Buildings go up and down. Buildings are demolished in America all the time. I mean, maybe that's what they should have said. Maybe they should have said it was earmarked for demolition. That's why it was pre-wired. It was coming down anyway the following week, and we just thought it would make sense, given the situation, that we should bring it down early, just in case the fire caught hold of those explosives and it went off in a reckless fashion. Now that, you see, we would believe, wouldn't we? We would think, oh, that was convenient, but okay, I believe that. But to believe that as you said earlier, that or to ask us to believe that the building came down because 94 steel columns all warped because the desks were on fire at the same moment, which brought it down into its own footprint, is, well, I think they're making fun of us. I mean, it's so unbelievable. I think somebody's sitting in his office, someone will say, I'll tell them that, they'll believe it. I think it's a joke. It didn't happen. It would have been far more plausible, as I said in my book, if they'd actually said, like I just mentioned, the building was earmarked, it was coming down on September the 17th, the explosives were in place, the tenants were no longer there, everyone had moved out, it was derelict. Once we saw the damage, we didn't want these pre-prepared explosions to start going off in a reckless manner and damage other buildings around, so we decided to bring the demolition forward and pulled the building at a moment's notice. It made sense. Now, we would have all believed that and we'd have moved on and no one would be talking about Building 7 today, would they?
I think the conspiracy would be null and void if Building 7 didn't fall, number one, and number two, skipping over to the Pentagon, which we'll get into later, if that hole was actually higher. Because that hole does not make sense to the size of a 757 aircraft. But we could get into that later. But with Building 7, one of the things that I learned, and I never really thought about this, because I had seen videos about it being controlled demolition. But I watched a video last night, and I thought this gentleman described it perfectly. And I did not know this. When you implode a building to fall on top of itself, the first part to go is the middle of the building. And if you watch the main footage of Building 7 follow, the penthouse actually falls into the building.
Yeah.
Rather than if it was due to the damage from I believe it was pillar number 79 that was affected by debris from the World Trade Center North Tower falling, it would have collapsed down on its side, not into itself, which it did, and which the NIST report says it did as well.
That fracture that you're talking about, which I'm sure many people, many listeners now are going to jump onto YouTube and watch, is right. You're talking about the penthouse building or whatever it is at the top. It's a water house. So there's a structure on top of the building, and it's just to the left of that gives and falls. It looks like, as you say, it falls into itself. That is the compelling evidence of a controlled demolition. I mean, that's what everybody has looked to that, and every expert that's looked at this video and reported on it has said exactly the same thing. That is a controlled demolition because of that fracture next to the penthouse, as you call it. A split second, a fraction of a second before the building starts falling down. You can see it gives way. It gives way in a controlled manner. And as you rightly say, it's not to do with fire affecting the steel structure of the building. You know, and that isn't just us talking about this on a late night having a few drinks and saying, yeah, we know what happened, it was this. We don't know we know what happened, but we don't know why. And what we know it wasn't was an office fire that became uncontrollable and made the building unstable. Nobody believes that anymore, and nobody really believed that at the time. As you said, that was your moment when you saw this at the time. And yet still, the 9/11 Commission report, this is the important thing, still the 9/11 Commission report has overlooked all the evidence and said the curtains were on fire, building fell down. Well, no, it didn't. That wasn't the reason. We know that that's not true. So why are you lying to us? This is why the conspiracy theory continues. That's the conspiracy theory. As I said in my book, again, as I concluded, all we really know is that the 9/11 Commission report, the official findings, that's the conspiracy. And what I did in the book, which I've referred to time and time again throughout it, is I'm not drawing conclusions for anybody else. I'm just presenting the facts. This is what's happened. This is what was said about it. This is how it happened. This is the result. I don't ever say this is why or this is the alternative. The whole book really is about why the 9/11 Commission report can't be true, because this is what it says and this is what we know actually happened. Unfortunately, like everybody else, we still don't know who or why. And I think that there are 3,800 odd families 15 years later that do deserve to know. In fact, many more than that now, as we sadly realised, thanks to that dust cloud, many, many more than the original number of victims have now been. I mean, that number's probably up to 5,500 by now. 15 years later, with the illnesses and the damage that were caused to people who were caught in that dust cloud in New York. So it is a much, much bigger and it's an event that's still ongoing. People are still being affected. Why can't they know the truth? Why can't somebody find out what happened and tell us?
Let me ask you this, because Building 7's debris was cleaned up very, very quickly.
Yeah, another smoking gun.
I mean, they had to wait 3 months. It's the longest fire in history at 92 days because the molten steel was burning so hot underneath all of the rubble of the World Trade Centers as well as Building 7 that they had to wait to get the debris out of there. But when they started moving the debris out, scientists who were able to collect dust particles from the building found that there was not just thermite, but some sort of military-grade nanothermite that, I guess, pocks open when it is heated up into a reddish silver-type substance. Yeah. And that was found in there. This nanothermite had never been seen publicly before. What do you know about the nanothermite?
I know that there's fairly compelling evidence that it existed both in Building 7 and in the 2 towers. Again, go back to the initial reports. Again, you can find them in YouTube. Thank goodness for YouTube, because where would we be without it? If all of these documentaries and interviews... For example, on the day, I remember seeing an interview with a couple of firemen who were basically talking to each other, but the camera was on them, and they were being interviewed, but they were looking around and confused at each other, saying, where was all that molten steel coming from? Oh, yeah, I saw that, the rivers that were running down the steps in the basement. Where was that all coming from, this red molten steel? Where did that come from? They were as confused as anybody else. And the media soon stopped running those clips and stopped asking those questions. Again, it's why. Going back to how you just started this question, by the way, you talked about the clear up of the steel structure. Do you know how soon that clear up of Building 7 started? It's not a trick question. I'm just asking.
No, I believe it was within either a number of days or within a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Shall I tell you? Shall I surprise you?
Yeah, please.
90 minutes.
90 minutes.
90 minutes.
Wow. That is what I was not expecting.
90 minutes. There was a constant stream of trucks that was shipping that steel structure of Building 7 particularly. It was taken by barges across the Hudson River into a scrap metal dealer called Hugo New Schnitzer that's at the Fresh Kills landfill at Staten Island. You can probably guess I'm reading from my book. Yeah. And they were going at a rate of one truck every 3.5 minutes from 90 minutes out to the building being gone. 350,000 tons of steel were processed and sold and shipped to Chinese companies within days. Why? I mean, surely there was evidence there. Surely there's somebody wanted to look through the evidence to find out why that building came down. But again, like I said to you about the Larry Silverstein comment and why I don't believe it, we said let's pull the building. Who would stop them? Imagine all this scrap metal being taken away at a time like that. Who's going to stand there in the street and say, "Well, stop! Everybody stop! Nothing leaves this site." Of course, it just went and kept going, and nobody thought to stop them. And the investigators weren't appointed anyway for certainly days, if not weeks. So by the time the investigators were appointed, the evidence from Building 7 wasn't even in New York anymore. It was on ships on its way to China. 80% of the steel, 80% was removed from Ground Zero collectively, that's Buildings 1, 2 and 7, was already on the slow boat to China before investigators even had a chance, well, before they were even appointed, before anybody knew that they were the right person to be asking the questions. Prior to that, everyone was just as confused as everybody else, and suddenly an investigating panel is appointed and they think, okay, these are our priorities, we've got to examine that building. Damn, it's gone. Nobody had the authority to impound any of it. There was no one appointed. It was gone.
No, I have no idea. That's the big reason. Now, there was some rumor that there was gold hidden under Building 7, and that's what they wanted to retrieve before stealing it, because the gold was never found either.
I mean, you see, now that would be a motive. That may or may not be true. It would be motive. Imagine the other motives that could be in play there. I mean, just imagine the sensitive information and equipment that would have been found in those filing cabinets from Building 7, fluttering all over the city. The FBI, how many investigations? Well, we can come to that in a moment, if you like. I mean, there were many, many, many thousands of high-level, serious investigations that had to be halted because the evidence had gone. There's another motive. The evidence had gone. World Trade Center 7 was no longer there. Their offices were empty. The paperwork somehow wasn't fluttering around New York City on the debris. It was gone. You rightly say there was talk of gold being hidden underneath, and there's also rumors of billions of dollars in cash, billions and billions of dollars in cash that were in the safes in those buildings or in the boxes. Was that the motive? See, there are many possible motives, but we don't know what they are. The point is, all of that information. Imagine just how there were several that I'm not going to name. I think I do in the book. I'm struggling to remember now. I wrote it 2 years ago. But there were several major figures, major companies that were under serious investigation by the FBI. I mean, I can mention Bernie Madoff because he was found guilty. I'm talking about that kind of investigation. billion-dollar frauds where the evidence was gone in minutes. Investigation dropped, lack of evidence. Quite a few people benefited from that, from the Building 7 coming down. Too many people to even begin to start pinpointing them or finger pointing and saying, well, he might be involved. He was going to jail for 1,000 years over that, and now he's walking free again, and so on and so on. There's a much bigger picture than the one where the 9/11 Commission report concludes. much bigger picture.
One interesting stat, and we're running up against a break here, and I want to get into this after the break because I think this is important for our listeners to hear.
Yeah.
We need to talk about NIST because in their report, NIST concluded that they had seen no evidence that the collapse of World Trade Center 7 was caused by bombs, missiles, or any sort of controlled demolition. However, they did not search for any explosive devices, or they even went as far as saying that nobody ever talked about hearing explosions, yet it's all over the internet. Police, firefighters, regular people, the janitor of the building saying, we heard explosions underneath the building. And this just seems very, very contrived right from the beginning. But we're going to get into NIST right after this. And we only got about 45 seconds here before we need to go to break. Quick few words, Albert, on what you think of NIST.
Well, in direct response to your point there, of course NIST didn't conclude that there was any evidence of bombs because there was no evidence. We just explained why. NIST was unable to examine any evidence. They should never have drawn that conclusion. I mean, their report is almost as if it's been written by a 12-year-old as a school essay. They had no right to draw that conclusion because they did not investigate. They couldn't do because the evidence was gone. It was on the slow boat to China before NIST was even appointed.
And I'm going to get you to hold on there. We'll pick that up right after this. Just for the record, NIST is part of the United States Department of Commerce. They have an annual budget from the government of $964 million. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back with more 9/11 talk with Albert Jack right after this.
365 days a year, we're in the field, investigating UFO sightings, talking to alien abductees, and visiting secret military locations like Area 51. We're UFO Seekers, official partner of Spaced Out Radio. Follow our daily search for the truth at ufoseekers.com or like us on social media. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Want to learn more about aliens, cover-ups, conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal? All you have to do is tune in S4 as we take over Spaced Out Radio Night, starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday night, right after Spaced Out Saturdays. Hi there, this is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Join me, Corey Ruiz, and friends as we discuss the hot topics of the night. It's fun, entertaining, and as dark as the night. Find us at spacedoutradio.com.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your Four Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
Want a place to share your experiences without feeling judged? We have the place for you. If you've experienced sightings or contact with ETs, ghosts, cryptids, or UFOs, and you'd like someone to confidentially look into the matter, just fill out an SOR Sightlines report. Our goal is to help you get the answers you need to the experiences you've had with our professional team of researchers. Your information stays 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines report. Fill out your experience today only at spacedoutradio.com.
Psychic Sundays, spiritual communication, ET contact, Sasquatch in your backyard. We will have it all on Cosmic Passport with me, Elizabeth Anglin. Each Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, at spacedoutradio.com, I will take you on a journey of enlightenment. The goal is learning from the soul on out. We'd love it if you joined our experience, Cosmic Passport, heard Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
From British Columbia to Northern California, Pacific North Weird has Cascadia covered. Check out our feature videos at spacedoutradio.com, where I, Vincent Zunza, and my super sleuth partner Alexandra Sullivan track down the weird and strange stories from around the Pacific Northwest, from Bigfoot to Mel's Hole and everything in between. This is what makes life exciting. So why report the normal when we can report the Pacific North Weird right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
Welcome to Spaced Out Saturdays with me, Dave Cruz from Beyond the Strange. Our weekly feature on spacedoutradio.com will take you around the world discussing everything from the paranormal to the latest conspiracies from the top guests in their fields. We won't leave any story uncovered. Spaced Out Saturdays at spacedoutradio.com starting 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to the second hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, Frank Ficino and Stanton Friedman are going to join us. We're going to talk about the 70th anniversary of the Flatwoods Monster. It's going to be interesting, to say the least, to have both Frank and Stanton's perspectives on that show. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. Great to have you with us as well. We are also live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Yogi Bogey Box. Yogi Bogey Box is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect live with me during the show as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. During the show, you can also join up on the SOR Space Travelers Club for some great live chat during the broadcast. We are also on Instagram, Dave Scott SOR. You can listen to us on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live. You can also tune us in on TuneIn and download and subscribe to our channel on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month, read up on the encounter online, shop at the Spaced Out Radio store, rock out to some Bumblefoot, or catch some UFO Seekers or Contact TV videos, everything at spacedoutradio.com. Tonight we are talking with author Albert Jack. We are talking about the conspiracy of 9/11 on the 16th anniversary of this devastating attack that claimed the lives of 2,977 people. Albert wrote a book called 9/11 Conspiracy. And Albert, welcome back.
Thank you.
Right before, I do want to get to a couple things here first.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. Way off topic. Goddess Michelle at hashtag Spaced Out Radio was asking, I need to know what kind of birds you have, because it's just important to know. Now, you live near a mountainside, so those aren't really your birds.
No, they're not my birds. But it's not a mountain, it's a hillside. I live in Thailand on the Gulf Coast. I think we're about 140 kilometres south of Bangkok, down on the coast. And in this place where I am, we've got a Buddha hill, like a Buddha, not a mountain. It's a hill you can walk up for exercise. It's not a mountain, but it's quite steep, with a big gold Buddha sat on the top of it. My apartment, my condo, is on floor number 6, so I'm looking out directly into the treetops beside this hill. So I've got probably some birds and some wildlife going on no more than 50 metres away from me, I guess, but I didn't notice them. They're not on my balcony, they're not mine.
Well, we can hear them perfectly. They sound great. They sound great.
I don't like birds. I think they're horrible creatures. I wouldn't let them anywhere near me.
Really? They're birds, man. What do they do to you? They eat bugs.
I'm not really a fan. No, I mean in the sense that I wouldn't have them as pets or in cages, certainly on my balcony or something like that. They're out there. They're wild. I don't know what. I can't even see them. I can hear them though. Now you mention it.
There you go. We're hearing them fine.
Very peaceful, huh?
Oh, it just sets the tone. It sets the tone beautifully. We also, this is off topic, we also want to wish one of our listeners a happy birthday, Alan Karcher, who's been listening to us in the Spreaker chat room. Happy birthday to you. Welcome. And for another birthday, absolutely. And I hope you have another great year ahead of you. Right before the break, we started talking about NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They came out with a report specifically about Building 7, how it collapsed. They said it was due to the fires that were caused inside the building from structural damage from the falling World Trade Center. But if you read your book, you read Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, who are some very, very smart people, they will tell you that the way the building collapsed at free fall speed, there is absolutely no way that that tower was brought down by anything other than controlled demolition.
That's right. And as I've said before, and as I talk about multiple times in the book, it's important for people to do their own research. It's no good just listening to this program. It's no good. I mean, hopefully we'll provoke a few people and provoke some thought, some conversation. But it's no good also just reading my book, because you're just going to, that's what he said. That's what I say. That's what I think. I try not to do that in the book. I try and just present the facts fully, no news, just facts. But one of the things you can do, relating to exactly the point you just made, is go and go and read or listen to anything that's written or said by an architect called Richard Gage, who is one of the members of the Architects and Engineers for Truth, 9/11 Truth. And do your own research. He's an architect, he's an engineer. Go and listen to what he has to say and draw your own conclusions. The truth is that no steel or concrete building, as you said earlier, has ever been, ever in history of concrete and steel buildings, completely leveled to the ground, collapsed, either into its footprint or not, by a minor fire.
Alan, we're getting a really bad static out of Skype right now. I know you're in Thailand. There you go. Now you seem to be clearer.
I've got you quite clearly. We're okay, are we?
Yeah. Let's try it again, if you don't mind.
Well, I was just saying that, as you mentioned earlier, in the history of steel and concrete buildings, nothing has ever been completely leveled to the ground, collapsed, either into its own footprint, suspiciously or not, fallen over, toppled over, fallen down by a minor fire, neither before September 11 or since. Yet NIST conclude, and this is what I mentioned earlier about my feeling that it had been written by a 12-year-old school report, the official conclusion, and I'll read it because it's very short: fires on multiple floors in World Trade Center 7, which were controlled but otherwise similar to fire experienced in other tall buildings, caused an extraordinary event. Heating of floor beams and girders caused a critical support column to fail, initiating fire-induced progressive collapse that brought the building down. That's it. That's what they've got to say about it. That's their conclusion. As you said, how do they know this? They didn't do any research or any investigation into the girders because it was on the slope over to China by the time it had even been pointed.
Absolutely. Albert, I'm gonna give you we're gonna disconnect this call. I'm gonna call you right back here because I want to see if a new connection will help us out. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Hold on 1 second. We're gonna bring Albert right back in here. I apologize. That's sometimes the connection what we get from his home in Thailand in regards to this show. This is why I'm hoping soon we don't have to use Skype much longer. All right. Alan, how you doing?
Albert, testing.
We're still a little rough. My friend, is there another storm going on there?
No, I'm perfectly clear, and I have you as crystal clear. I can hear you perfectly. No, nothing going on here. I don't have any other electrical devices on. I turned everything off.
All right. We are literally getting about every second to third word that you are saying, my friend. Every second. Yeah. All right. I'm going to try something different here, my friend. I'm going to try and connect with you through... I'm wondering if I can do this. I'm wondering what we can do here. Because I definitely want to continue going through the knowledge that you have in your research with 9/11 conspiracy book going up, and this being the anniversary. I'm just trying to figure out what we can do with the connection here.
Well, let's start by I'll try contacting you. So let's ring off and I'll then.
All right. Let's try that.
Maybe that'll help. Let's see. Okay.
All right. We're going to get Albert right back here on the program here momentarily and see how that goes. Sometimes, like I've said to you guys before, this whole Skype thing that we have to use, and unfortunately there is no way around it with our setup. It is an absolute pain in my behind having to deal with Skype on a daily basis. It's just not professional. It really isn't. And I don't know how else to put it. I know, as we stated just last week, that both Spreaker and Blog Talk Radio have merged. And hopefully, when the two make the merge, because Spreaker's bought out Blog Talk Radio, hopefully they get into the area of bringing the phone lines in that Blog Talk Radio had, because I can't understand why Spreaker hasn't done that. So we're going to try and bring Albert right back in here momentarily. We'll see if we can get a good connection this time. So please bear with me, because this ruins a good program, man. We're trying to do quality journalism here, and it's hard to do. It's hard to do. All right, Albert, you back?
How's that?
Much better. Much better.
Okay, good. Glad to hear it.
All right. Now, we were talking about the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or otherwise NIST, and their study that they did on 9/11 regarding the fact that they said there was no evidence of bombs, explosives, or anything to bring the building down on its own. Yet they fully admit that they didn't study it either.
Well, NIST couldn't have studied any evidence. NIST doesn't have any evidence. Excuse me, NIST shouldn't be releasing reports that make any conclusions whatsoever. We know that the building was removed. As I said to you just before the break, and if anybody has just joined us, I'll say it again, that within 90 minutes, the steel structure and the concrete from the building was being removed at the rate of 1 lorry load per 3 minutes, constantly, for something like the next 2.5 days until the site was completely cleared. The other thing that's interesting about that we didn't mention earlier, and it's just yet another little side issue that shouldn't really be ignored, that it's also on record that there was no security placed around the site of World Trade Center 7. And as we know, the occupiers of that building were the CIA, the FBI, FEMA, various other, the Secret Service, various other high level in terms of security clearance agencies were the tenants of that particular building. And yet, when the building came down, either forget for a moment whether it was a fire or the reason for it, or whether it's a controlled demolition, or forget all that for a minute. In the debris, the rubble pile that existed, there was no security placed around it whatsoever. Nothing. And we know that because witnesses were walking through, commenting on things like the rivers of metal, the molten metal that you mentioned earlier. We know that witnesses are on record as having walked through this debris field. There was no normal witnesses, people like you and I don't mean security officials or police or investigators. Isn't that odd? Imagine all the paperwork and all the highly sensitive information that would have been in those filing cabinets, that would have been in those safes, that would have been floating and fluttering around this demolition site. Isn't it odd that there was no security there?
When they decided to clean up that debris so quickly, and they decided to get it out of there, and they put it onto trucks to ship it. I believe they shipped it over to New Jersey, and then they put it on these ships, so to speak, to get it on out of there. Where did that debris go, and why did they get rid of it so quickly?
Well, no one knows why. It's like we mentioned earlier, it was one of those situations where nobody was really, well, obviously somebody was in control, but there was nobody there to ask any questions. Once those articulated lorries, 400 of them every 24 hours, were shipped in. That, by the way, is one of the truly heroic stories of 9/11. I mean, whoever it was who arranged for 400 articulated lorries every 24 hours to be in and out of the demolition site at World Trade Center within 90 minutes of the collapse, and to clear that site within 350,000 tons of steel, and get it shipped off in a coordinated way across the river on barges. Whoever organised that with only 30 minutes notice we should take our hats off. If we are to believe that this was, and that is what happened, by the way, we know that's what happened. If we are to believe that this was all a reaction to an event and it all was coordinated within 30 minutes of one of the major and most dramatic events in probably American history, that somebody was sharp enough to react that quickly, and we're expected to believe this was not a pre-planned event, pre-planned with military, dare I say it, precision. It's ridiculous, and that's the reason why we know that that NIST hadn't carried out any proper investigations, because there was nothing to investigate. By the time they were appointed, the site was cleared, and all of that material from the building 7, was to China. It left Newark and New Jersey, the landfill sites, and was sold for $120 a ton. At that particular time, by the way, this is another aside, American steel mills, and I've looked this up, at that particular time they were paying $160 a ton for scrap steel, and this was all sold for $120 a ton to Chinese companies. Now, I don't know why, which is your next question, why? Isn't it time that somebody asked the right person? That asked somebody who could answer that question, why? Isn't that the sort of question we should be asking? Because that's not covered in the 9/11 Commission report. NIST don't mention this.
Albert, why do you think that there's been so few people speak out about this? Why do you think that, whether it's Giuliani, whether it's Bloomberg, whether it's, I believe, Governor Pataki at the time, and correct me if I'm wrong, or other people have not, on a governmental level, spoke out? I mean, the closest we have is Larry Silverstein, but then he buttoned up pretty darn quick.
Fear would be one reason. Fear of what? I don't know. Fear of ridicule would be one reason. It's amazing how the word truth has been hijacked. I mean, nowadays, to be a 9/11 truther is to be a nutcase. I mean, suddenly the word truth has been given a negative narrative, if you like. Seeking the truth is something you shouldn't be doing, apparently. I don't know why more... I mean, there are plenty of people who do speak up, by the way. There are plenty of people who do speak up. There is a Pilots for 9/11 Truth organisation where we'll come into this, I'm sure, if we've got time. I think we've got time. Who will tell you categorically, on record, hand on the Bible, hand on heart, whatever it is they hold dear and swear by, that they couldn't fly those planes in the manner on the flight paths that they were flown. They couldn't do it. They don't know how to. The planes are too big, don't manoeuvre as well as they're supposed to have done, certainly can't be flown at 500 miles an hour, 6 feet off the ground into the Pentagon. It can't be done. These people are on record. There are books written about it. They've gone on to... They've never been on mainstream media, but then mainstream media has its own narrative. We know that. But you'll find them all over YouTube. You'll find them all over... But of course, we're then told, they're nutters. They're truthers. Don't listen to them. You know? So fear would be one of the reasons. Fear of ridicule is a big reason. To go publicly and to question... I mean, we're not in fear of our lives, by the way. I mean, I certainly don't fear any backlash by somebody in America knocking on my door and saying, hey, you wrote this book questioning all these things. You're in trouble. I don't fear that at all. What they do is they just ignore you. They just regard you as a nutter. Put him in a straitjacket. Don't listen to him. He's a truther. Well, I'm not really a truther, other than I know that the truth isn't in the 9/11 Commission report. And I've read it, by the way, and people should. Again, you can find a link to that on my website. You can read it for yourself. It's extraordinary, actually. Extraordinary that was the official conclusion. That's the conspiracy, right there.
Let's move on here to the dancing Israelis, because there was a New York Times report just a couple of days afterwards that a group of Middle Eastern men actually were cheering on and filming the planes flying into the World Trade Center. What did you ever investigate on that?
Well, all of that. They were dressed as that. Again, there's all sorts of conspiracy theories about this. I suppose I want to start by saying, I mean, whenever I bring this up, or whenever there's I don't know if you can hear those fireworks going off. That's all up on the Buddha Hill there. Somebody's letting off fireworks for good luck. Perhaps they're getting married or it's somebody's birthday. Can you hear them?
Got them clearly.
Yeah. It's not machine gun fire. I'm not being attacked. They're just little Chinese bangers that go off 3 or 4 times a day, and I can see smoke coming up through the hill there. It's all very nice, huh?
As long as it's not AK-47s.
Well, there may be snipers up there. If there are, they've got terrible shot because they've missed me by 100 meters. Where were we? We were talking about the dancing Israelis. Well, I want to point out, whenever I do something, I post a story about something like this on my website or on social media, you invariably get piles of abuse, lots of abuse from people who call you all sorts of names. And I'm not actually blaming the Israelis here. I mean, I don't know who's responsible for 9/11. All I'm doing in this particular section on the dancing Israelis is proving, really without any doubt at all, but you can draw your own conclusions by reading 9/11 conspiracy, that some people had advanced knowledge. And these guys, there was a group of Israeli, students who apparently were dressed up like Arabs, but looked Middle Eastern. I don't know. I'm sure Israeli people do look Middle Eastern. I don't know how they dress. But they were working on temporary work permits in New York for a removal company. And these guys were seen on top of this removal van, dancing and cheering and filming and taking selfies and photographs of each other with the buildings burning in the background. I don't know if any of this really points to any evidence of who did what, other than that there was clearly some kind of advanced knowledge. These four, who have since been outed as Israeli spies, by the way, were arrested. You should read what I wrote about it, and you can read anybody's report. They were arrested by New York policemen. They were detained for something like 30 days. They failed. Each of them failed 30 lie detector tests over the 30 days. They were questioned every day for 30 days. They failed the lie detector tests. Eventually, for whatever reason, somebody gave them the order to release them and deport them. 3 weeks later, they were on Israeli TV confirming that it was them and that their job, significantly, even without admitting their participation or anything they did or who they were employed by, but their job was to cover the events of 9/11. They were there to cover the events firsthand and report back to Mossad, to Israeli security. Now, again, I'm not saying that the Israelis did it here. This is the first thing that is thrown at me. As soon as I mention the dancing Israelis, somebody says, you're just blaming them. It's always the Jews, isn't it? You're a Zionist, you're this, and you're that. No, I'm not. I'm just telling you that these guys, on behalf of Mossad and on behalf of Israel, had advanced knowledge of the attack. They confirmed it because they've said it on television. Go on YouTube. You can even see the interview. If you look at my book and get their names, because all their names are listed in this particular chapter, Google them, YouTube it. Like I say, they don't admit to having any other involvement other than saying they were there to document the event, in which case there was advanced knowledge. They knew something was going to happen. They were there on behalf of Israel and on behalf of Mossad to, in inverted commas, document it, take photographs, listen, watch, find out what was happening, etc., etc. Doesn't mean Israel were involved. It means that they knew, or somebody knew in advance, something was happening. Again, very important information, a very important footnote to the story. Many people don't even know about the dancing Israelis. You talk about 9/11 and mention this, like, what? Who? Never heard of it. Mm-hmm. You're just blaming Israel. No, we're not. Not at all. There are many Israeli connections, by the way. Larry Silverstein, of course, the owner of the buildings, as pointed out earlier, Israeli. Many connections to Israel. No one's saying it was anything to do with Israel, other than they knew something was going to happen. They had their van parked, perfect view. They were up on a hill. They were on a car park on the 5th floor. They were filming everything, and they knew something was going to happen. Who does that? They say they were tourists, taking tourist shots. Really? 30 times in 30 days they lied to the FBI under oath and under lie detectors.
Were they not arrested carrying box cutters?
They were. They were. I don't know how significant that is in connection with the. If you're implying that there's a connection between the box cutters on the aircraft used by the terrorists, maybe that's significant. They were posing as, in other words, working for a removal company. I can't remember the name of the removal company offhand, but again, it's in the book. It's all quite Do I have it written here? Yeah, Urban Moving Systems, they were called. Urban Moving Systems, owned by another Israeli called Dominic Suter, who went missing shortly afterwards, and the offices were abandoned. They were clearly a spying unit that was set up in business, and what better than removal company vans to use for parking up somewhere and leaving it there for 2 days whilst you're observing what's going on around. Much of that's conjecture perhaps, but certainly they had advanced knowledge and were there to document the events. Some were found with cash, some were found with false passports, some were found with all sorts of things that would be connected anyway, usually with spies. False identities, I don't know, maybe a wig and a Groucho mask moustache, who knows how they were disguising themselves. Yeah, they were found with some odd things, but that's not necessarily connecting them with the hijackers in any way.
It just seems weird because box cutters were the most powerful weapon of the month at that time.
Yeah, but anybody working for a removal company will have box cutters in his toolbox or in his pocket as well. But by box cut, we call them Stanley knives. You're talking about a very small retractable bladed knife that's used to cut open tape on boxes. Yeah, well, every removal company has those. It may be a red herring to connect the two. It may just be, it may mean nothing.
How was the video of them filming the planes and the laughing and dancing found?
I've never seen that. I've only heard it reported. I don't think anybody. I'm sure if they were Israeli spies, well, I think it's fairly clear they were Israeli spies. Then no, that hasn't been released, has it? You won't find that on YouTube. But witnesses saw them. In fact, there are. What I have got is transcripts of the telephone calls that were made to 911 at the time.
Feel free to read that out if you want.
Well, I've got one of them in the book. I've just been scrolling back through my PDF here. 9/11 Conspiracy, available at all online stores. Dispatcher, Jersey City Police. Caller, yes, we have a white van with 2 or 3 of these guys in here. They look like Palestinians and they're going around a building. Caller, there's a minivan heading towards the Holland Tunnel. I see the guy by Newark Airport mixing some junk and he has one of those Sikh uniforms on. He has what? Caller, he was dressed like an Arab. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. I've got a couple of these transcripts in the book. So there is evidence of people watching these guys and reporting them to the police, which, by the way, was how they were caught. The cops put an APB out and found the van based on the description and arrested them. And they were told at the time, there was a very significant, one of the driver of the van, who may or may not have been the leader, told the arresting officer, look, it's not us. We're on your side. We're on the same side here. He was quite clearly distancing himself from the actual events. I can't find the comment, to be honest. Right now, no, I can't find the comment of the guy that said that, but he's making it clear to the police. It's in the police statement as well that the guys were saying, "Look, you've got the wrong guys. We're on the same side as you. We're here to protect. We're working together." In other words, it's us against the Muslims. Was the point he was making.
Did you believe at the time when this happened that it was Muslim hijackers?
Yes. Yes, I'm reluctant to say that, but I mean, I really, like everybody else, only based on the newspaper reports, only based on the TV reports. The information we were getting was all through the media at the time, and we were all being told. I mean, I have doubts about this now, but your question was, did I believe at the time? And I think we all did.
Right.
I don't think I really, at that particular time, thought there was any great conspiracy going on. Other than quite a lot of things didn't make sense. Where was the plane? I remember, by the way, we're going to get on to the Pentagon, but just to give you another example of why I was sceptical from a very early stage, is there was one report, I think it was Dan Rather, I've looked at it since, and I remember it, from the reporting from the Pentagon for whichever news station he was working for at the time. And the chyron on the bottom of the screen was saying, third plane has hit the Pentagon, and he's reporting, finger in the ear, classic style, into the microphone, saying, we're getting reports that a plane has crashed into the Pentagon, blah, blah, blah. And a guy wanders over. I think you can find this on YouTube still. A guy wanders over to him while he's live on air, probably doesn't realise he's live on air, and says to the reporter, "Did you just say that was a plane?" So just a member of just somebody walking past. Okay, did you say that was a plane? And he's turned to him, still finger in his ear, microphone in hand, saying, "Yeah, we're getting reports that a plane has hit the Pentagon." He's gone, "No, that was no plane, man. That was a bomb. I saw it. There was no plane there." And the guy's gone, "Really? Well, we're being told it was an..." If you imagine this live going on, we're being told that it was an aircraft that hit the Pentagon. And this coloured guy wearing a white shirt, I don't know anything else about him, says, "No, man, you're kidding. That wasn't a plane. That was a bomb. We heard it. We saw it. There's no plane over that side." So straight away, like I said to you right at the start of this interview, remember what you heard, remember what you saw and thought and felt when you first heard about it, when it was first being reported. Because that report's gone. No one ever mentions that again. No one's ever mentioned again that people were reporting within minutes, within 10, 15, 20 minutes of the whatever it was at the Pentagon, that there was no plane there. And anybody who mentions the fact now that there was no plane there is dismissed as a conspiracy theorist or a conspiracy analyst, as some people call themselves, or as a truther or a nut job or a what was it then? If it wasn't a plane, what was it? Well, we don't know that much, is my answer, but we do know what it wasn't.
The reason why... Yes, and we're going to get into more of the Pentagon coming up here. But the reason why I asked you about that is, and I recalled this, and I know reading in your book, you reminded me of it again, but I do recall this from working in the news studio where I worked in Vancouver, that originally Osama bin Laden had stated that he had absolutely nothing to do with these terrorist attacks.
Yeah, he wasn't even claiming credit. He said from the beginning, I don't know how much of what Osama bin Laden said could be believed or trusted, but you could be fairly certain that he would be claiming credit if there was any credible way that he could. I mean, that was what we were told at the time. If you remember, we were told that Osama bin Laden did it deliberately to provoke Americans to come to their side of the world. It was easier to fight them in the Middle East than it would be in America. In other words, for Al-Qaeda to invade America would be near on impossible, but carry out an attack like this and bring the American army over there where they could get at them, as it were. That's what we were being told was Al-Qaeda's motive. What other motive would there be? Apart from a sheer terror, just an attack. In the wider sense of the political spectrum, what other motive could there be for Osama bin Laden to be trying to get American troops onto Iraqi soil? I mean, or Afghanistan and Iraqi soil. Bin Laden had no reason to want Iraq overthrown or Afghanistan invaded. Wouldn't have been his motive at all. He didn't want to die, did he? I mean, this was the other question, wasn't it? How could, and I think I made this point in the introduction to the book. We are expected to believe that a bearded, white-caped terrorist hiding in a cave with little more than a map and a stick to point out with is responsible for a couple of the most highly organised. This includes getting false passports. This includes getting visas for the so-called terrorists to be able to get into America in the first place. The whole spectrum of how this thing was carried out could not have been carried out from a cave in Pakistan or wherever bin Laden was supposed to have been hiding out at that time. Don't forget, he was the world's most wanted man at the time. So I think from very early on, even though we'd probably not heard much about Al-Qaeda at the time, I mean, at that time, in 2001, we all know all about it now and its motives. But even then, I thought probably this is starting to sound a little bit far-fetched. Really? Do we honestly think if it was a coordinated attack like that, I mean, can you imagine if it was the Russians, let's say during the Cold War, do you think the Russians would have been able to pull this off? In the 1970s and 60s and 80s? Do you think Cuba could have pulled this off? Do you think any army, China, with the most technically advanced thinking and equipment and technology, could do this to America? The Pentagon, for goodness sake? The most heavily protected, monitored building possibly on the planet has ever seen, and someone can hit it with a 757 jet? That didn't make sense to me then.
What doesn't make sense to me in regards to it all is the fact that with the amount of military power that the United States has, we are supposed to believe that there were only 2 F-16 Falcon fighter jets patrolling the entire eastern seaboard of the United States.
Yeah.
That makes zero sense to me. Where's the Air National Guard units?
Yeah.
There's military bases spread up and down that coastline. How can you tell me? Where's the Navy? Are you telling me all the Navy planes were down as well?
Yeah. Well, I mean, their answer to that was there was a NORAD exercise going on, wasn't there? This is how they've answered that question. NORAD being the North American, I forget what it is now, but there was some kind of exercise going on so that the military and the Coast Guard and the people that would normally be patrolling and keeping a lookout were all diverted to an exercise that was being carried out over towards Canada somewhere in one of the states, Montana or whatever it is, that's fairly remote in the middle of America there. We're being told there was a live exercise going on, which is why attention was diverted. But you are right. I mean, do countries like America and cities like New York and Washington not protect themselves? You know, even if they weren't expecting and who could, even if the American, and I'm thinking out loud here, even if the American military weren't expecting an attack from aircraft that were hijacked, like passenger jets, if you like, if that's true, even if they weren't expecting that and were taken by surprise, why were they not expecting it? The Israelis knew it was coming. Other people knew something was going on. Larry Silverstein knew something was going on that day. The people who rigged the World Trade Center 7 knew something was going to happen that day. When I say rigged, I mean prepared it for demolition. There were lots of people that knew something was going on, and the American military and the Pentagon didn't. Don't you find that a little bit hard to believe?
It doesn't make sense to me. In regards to the Bin Laden family, there was a lot of speculation that when the flights were grounded, there were certain aircraft seen flying over New York and Washington. One of those was said to believe to be carrying the entire Bin Laden family that was in the United States at the time to get them out of the country. Do you buy that?
I don't know about that. I mean, I've read about that and I've heard about that. I never found any evidence of that. I mean, that may be true, and if it is, it raises the question as to why, and it also would be further evidence of advanced knowledge. But I've never found any evidence to suggest that's true. And what I did with the book, and hopefully that will reassure your listeners and maybe my readers too, is only stick to what we know, is to stick to the facts. You know, this is the handcuff behind the back and the bullet hole in the back of the head. You know, this is what we know. And there are lots of other peripheral things, and I tried to, and I've repeatedly said throughout the book, using Occam's razor to shave away what we think might have happened, what's been reported, what somebody said. And this is why I include things like the transcripts of the conversations to the police that have been released during the 999 calls in respect to the dancing Israelis, because those are facts. Rather than say, or rather than I include the story about something I saw on Facebook one day or on YouTube or read in the New York Times, etc. I've just stuck to what we know is true. Whether or not the Bin Laden family or anybody else was being evacuated from America on that particular day, I couldn't. If that's true, it's only further evidence of advanced knowledge. But you know what? I don't need any further evidence of advanced knowledge. I think we've got enough evidence of that already, without throwing red herrings into the mix, as it were.
Just to ask you about the aircraft once again, do you think that some of the other aircraft that were seen, I believe one was what looked to be a plain white 747, we do know that the United States government does have doomsday aircraft that fly around. Do you believe that that's what that aircraft was?
Could have been, couldn't it? There could have been a number of things. There are talk about the being the bait and switch, you know, which fooled the air traffic controllers. One of the it's a little bit like the moon landings and the other so-called conspiracy theories and the Manhattan Project as well, if I can just draw some sort of comparison. One of the things that we're told is that this couldn't have been a prepared, planned inside job. which I don't think it was, by the way, so I'm not going down that road, but just for example, this is what we're told. It couldn't have been because too many people would have had to have been involved. News would have got out somewhere along the line. Somebody would have said something. But then you need to remember that, like the Manhattan Project and like D-Day, for example, take D-Day, for example, when it comes to planning these major things, everybody is working on a need-to-know basis. In other words, I'll know something and I won't know the rest. I'll just know what my particular role is. I won't know how it's connected to anything else. You, Dave, in your studio, you might be given another role, and yet you will never talk about it. You understand?
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's almost the same way that we hear of the way things are conducted at Area 51. Exactly.
Some people know a little thing here, some people know a little thing here, somebody else knows a little thing here. You can end up, like the Manhattan Project, you can end up with tens of thousands of people being involved, and none of them really, even when the news comes out, none of them really necessarily know that the part they played was part of the overall, you understand? All they know is that they were told one day to move this from A to B, and somebody else moved it later from C to D, and so on. This is how these great events are planned, and so few people know about the whole picture. So few people can come up afterwards and say, "Oh yeah, I knew that was going to happen, and here's my evidence," because they don't have any either. All they know is that they were told to plan. Let me think of an example off the top of my head. All we know is one company was told to plan and have 300 removal trucks ready to be moved down to the Building 7 site at 1 hour's notice. That's all he knows. So the guy that coordinated that clear-up, that we now know cleared away all the evidence, will know nothing other than his company was given a contract to remove all the material from the demolished Building 7. He won't know why or how. I mean, he'll know what happened on 9/11. He won't have asked his boss, for example, or the guy sitting next to him, how did we know we had to plan for this? Do you know what I mean? It's a need to know, but the whole event would have been planned, and every person would only know one little small thing, the part they were involved in. That's why no one comes out and says anything. They don't know anything.
Let's move on to the black boxes. There's 4 black boxes that have apparently been incinerated, never to be found.
Yeah.
I believe this is one of the first times in aviation history that black boxes have never been found on land after a crash.
Each aircraft has 2 black boxes. One is for cockpit data and the other one is for aircraft data, I believe. One of your listeners may put me right on this, but I believe one of them is to record everything going in the cockpit, and the second one is to record, how much fuel has been used and location and basically aircraft mechanical information. So there are 2. So that's 8 black boxes, and they are the only 8 black boxes, as you say, in the history of aviation history that have been involved in aircraft disaster over land that have never been recovered, that have not survived fire. Another small detail. Isn't that suspicious?
Well, a passport of one of the hijackers did survive.
Well, you were talking about going on to World Trade Center 7. I was going to bring this up earlier. You mentioned the heat of the aircraft fire, which would have been quite intense. As you say, that initial explosion would have burned out within a few seconds at something like 1,000 degrees. The heat of that fire going on up there, which we're told collapsed buildings 1 and 2. There is also testimony and evidence and witness statements given by at least 2 people. There could be more. There probably are more. By at least 2 people who were in the rooms above the impact zone and escaped. They found a fire escape, or not a fire escape, a stairwell that hadn't been corrupted on one corner of the building. They were obviously very, very lucky, and they managed to walk down past the fire and escape and live to tell the tale and live to report how they were in the offices above the impact zone on that day. So if that fire was so intense, why don't they have singed hair? How are they not incinerated? How did that passport survive? The apparent passport from one of the hijackers. You can't have it both ways. If the fire is so intense that it's going to melt and warp a building that will then fall into its own footprint, but it's not intense enough to burn somebody's silk suit as he's walking down a stairwell within 10 metres of the fire, albeit maybe behind a closed door, or not destroy that passport that was found. I mean, this is somebody who's laughing at us, isn't it? They've thrown a passport in there and gone, go on, chuck that down there, everyone will believe that. It reminds me a little bit of that John Lennon quote when he wrote, when everyone was going mad about the Beatles, and what does this song mean and what does that song mean, and there must be hidden meanings in everything. And John Lennon wrote, I Am the Walrus, and famously commented to his record label at the time, said, let's see if anyone can work that out. Do you know what I mean? He was just having a laugh. He was just making up nonsense words. He was laughing at us for fun. And I think that passport story is one of those. Somebody's just tossed it in there and gone, go on, see how far we can go. Let's see if anyone believes this rubbish.
It is unbelievable indeed. But getting back to the black boxes, were you surprised in your research to know that they were incinerated? Comparatively to other crashes that you studied.
Yeah, by the time I got round to the part of the black boxes, I don't think I was surprised by anything at that time. I think we've got a helicopter going past us now, look. Air Sea Rescue. It's all happening today, isn't it?
That's okay. It's okay.
Sorry. Well, they weren't, were they? They weren't destroyed. Let's be practical about this. Let's be realistic about this. They weren't destroyed. They exist somewhere. The data's been read, examined. The person who found it in the rubble has probably been long since retired or died or moved or is no longer involved in any way, but he just played a small part. He was probably told it wasn't the black box, that wasn't what we were looking for. What you found was part of a pump from a generator. I mean, who knows what he was told? But that's why the story of the black boxes hasn't come out, because of course they've been found. Of course they've been studied, and of course they've been analysed. It's only the data, it's only the findings, the conclusions that haven't been found, that haven't been released, that we haven't been told about. Of course the black boxes survived.
Now you're quoted as saying, as Nicholas Damazzi in his book Behind the Scenes Ground Zero, that his job was to take federal agents around the site looking for the black boxes, and he says 3 of them were found.
Yeah, he said that you mean in World Trade Center 1 and 2?
Yes.
Of the 2 aircraft in there. So of those 4 that we talked about, the forward cockpit black box and the further back data black box. So the 4 from those 2 planes. This is where confusion comes in. Immediately you think, all 4. Okay, Pennsylvania, the Pentagon, and the 2 at the World Trade Center. That's not what he meant. He's talking about 2 from one plane and 2 from the other. The other 4 have never been mentioned. The Pentagon and Pennsylvania. They've never been mentioned as being found or seen or anything. But yeah, he did. He mentioned that 3 of the 4 from the World Trade Center 7 were found and handed in. I kind of believe that. I would think all 4. That was by one person, by the way. We're not saying, and that was he saw, he witnessed. The 4th one, very probably found and handed in as well. No, I believe they've all got them, don't you? Doesn't everybody? These people who do. Yeah, these people who have made these conclusions, the 9/11 Commission report, and the media, the fake news media, as Donald Trump likes to call them, as more and more obvious every day that he's right. Don't want us to know that. They don't want us to ask the questions. They don't want us to call for the data. They don't want a Congress inquiry. They don't want questions. They don't want us to know what the black box is revealed. Now, I think that's quite revealing, because they would certainly tell us quite a lot, particularly with regard to cockpit conversations. Why don't they want us to know that? Would that support their story? If it does support their story, the black box information would have been released, quite obviously, as it is as a matter of public interest with every air crash.
We got about 3 minutes here before we have to go to break, 2.5 actually. Do you believe then that some sort of international terrorist took over those planes and flew them into the World Trade Centers? Or do you think what a lot of people are now saying is that they were controlled remotely?
I've always thought that. I've always thought that they were controlled remotely, but let's get into that after the break, if you like, because that's quite a long conversation, I think. But I've always felt that technology was certainly available. But it begs the question is, if it was an inside job, why didn't they just do that? Why come up with this big elaborate story when all they had to do was set the autopilot to go into floor 87 of the World Trade Center at GPS, grid reference, this and that. And that was it. They didn't need to do anything else. One person could have done that. Only 3 people needed to know about it. There was no need for any other. You understand? The bigger picture. If that was the case, then those 4 planes could have been flown remotely. The autopilot could have been taken over and they could have been flown remotely straight into the buildings by 3 people. No one else would have needed to have known about it. So why the big elaborate story?
And on that note, we're going to get you to hold on here for just a moment. Well, I'll hit you up. We got about 30 seconds here, my friend. Do you buy... This to me is the most ridiculous one that I have heard. The fact that the planes that hit the towers were holograms. I think that's just being sheer stupid.
So do I, until I think back to my initial reaction. Remember? This is why I started by telling you about that. The initial reaction was, wow, that's fantastic. How do they do that? CGI. You know,
I think too many people saw it. There's too many witnesses to real planes.
I agree.
And on that note, I'm going to get you to hold. And on that note, I'm going to get you guys to hold on. Albert Jack is our guest. We're through 2 hours, 1 hour to go on the conspiracies of 9/11. This is the 16th anniversary of the terrorist attacks in New York, Washington, D.C., and Shanksville, Pennsylvania. We all remember where we were that day. I'll never forget. I know you guys won't either. We're going to get more into the planes that crashed into the towers. We're going to get more into the Pentagon, more into Shanksville. There's so many questions, not enough answers. But in the end, conspiracy or not, we need to remember that 2,977 innocent people died that day. And in the end, that's all that mattered. Whoever did it. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I'm your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back with more SOR coming up right after this.
We're getting strange on Saturday nights. Hi there, this is Dave Cruz, and each Saturday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I will take you on a tour of the weird and obtuse on Spaced Out Saturdays, from aliens to Sasquatch and every tinfoil hat in between. We got you covered. Join us at spacedoutradio.com for Spaced Out Saturdays. See you there.
Not ready for bed on Saturday night? Right after Spaced Out Saturdays, hop on over to S4 with Corey Ruiz and me, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. With S4, there are no limits to what we try and uncover. From government conspiracies to helping clean up the paranormal, no topic is safe on S4. We get to the heart of the matter, of the subjects you want to learn more about. So tune in on S4 starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, only on spacedoutradio.com.
Have you had an experience you can't explain? Would you like someone you can trust to look into it? We have just the place. The SOR Sightlines Report is the place for you to find answers. Whether it's Bigfoot, UFOs, Dogman, ghosts, aliens, or anything strange, the Sightlines Report will get you connected with one of our expert researchers to find out what's going on. All of your personal information is kept 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines Report, a place for you to find the answers you need. Only at spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there. I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4COP. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days, We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories, from alien encounters to the latest conspiracies. You won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Do UFOs exist? Are aliens real? Are the governments hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO seekers, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along with us as we journey across the United States, visiting UFO hotspots and alien hotspots, trying to document the UFO phenomenon. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
It's Cosmic Sundays with me, Elizabeth Anglin, in Cosmic Passport. Let me take you down a 3-hour spiritual journey where we will get into everything from ET contact to Psychic Sundays. It's a journey of listening and learning together with some of the best professionals in their fields. You can tune in to Cosmic Passport at spacedoutradio.com every Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, Stanton Friedman and Frank Fascino join us. We're going to talk about the 70th anniversary of the Flatwoods Monster. We had Frank on just a couple of months ago, asked if he could come back on the anniversary. Of course we said yes. Stanton's going to make his way as well. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome you in, all of you listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. Great to have you with us as well. We're also live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Yogi Bogey Box. Yogi Bogey Box is your password. What it means, nobody really knows, but Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect with us live during the show as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can also connect with the SOR Space Travelers Club on Facebook nightly to chat with the crew there. We're also on Instagram, Dave Scott SOR. You can listen to us on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live, tune us in on TuneIn, and you can download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. You can read up on the Encounter online, all your paranormal news daily. You can also shop at our Spaced Out Radio store, rock out to some Bumblefoot, or catch some videos from UFO Seekers and Contact TV, everything at spacedoutradio.com. For the final time tonight, we introduce Albert Jack. He is the author of 9/11 Conspiracy, joining us from Thailand. Albert, welcome back.
Thank you.
Right before the break, we were talking about whether or not, especially the planes going into the Twin Towers, were controlled by remote control, rather than inexperienced pilots who, it's been publicly noted, they could barely pass a test to fly a Cessna, let alone a 757 at high speed.
Well, that's how I would do it. If I was tasked with planning this four-pronged attack on America, that's how I would have done it. It would have needed very few people to be involved. Very little information could have got out. Easily done. You know, the autopilot could easily have been taken over remotely. In fact, there was technology available at that time which was designed to take over planes that had been hijacked. I mean, I'm not talking about these particular four. I mean, generally speaking, if there's a hijacked plane, let's say in, I don't know, Lebanon or somewhere anywhere in Europe, the plane could be taken over and then landed remotely without the pilot having anything to do with it, or taken to a place using GPS technology. You know, whether it be a military base or a normal airport. So this technology did exist, and therefore there's no reason to believe that for a moment that if it can be flown remotely from any location with pinpoint precision to land within a square yard on a certain runway somewhere, then why couldn't it be flown on a flight path to hit floor 80 of the World Trade Center? So that technology did exist. And if I was to be doing this, then that would be the simplest way of doing it. There would be very little conspiracy. Very few people would need to be involved. Just frankly, it would just be the person who set the coordinates. And then that's it. Job done. Turn the news on. And of course, if we had the black box evidence that we were talking about before the break, we would know that. Is that the reason why we're told the black boxes have not been recovered? Because then we would know that's what happened. The other theory, the other popular theory, if that's the right word, is that the planes were switched using the Cuban method that they were talking about in the 60s of flying the planes out and then running them parallel so that the air traffic controllers couldn't see the difference, and then they peeled away from each other, and, for example, Flight 11 would then become an empty military plane or a drone, unmanned, no pilot, which might explain all the witnesses that said they saw a dark plane with no windows and they didn't see a passenger jet, and we all know those witness statements. It could be that they were switched, and then it was the drones that were flown into the buildings and into the Pentagon, if you believe that a plane hit the Pentagon. But then that poses the next question, which is even worse, isn't it? Is where did the real plane land, and what happened to all the real passengers that were on there? That's even more sinister, if you want to believe that theory.
One of the questions that I do have as we switch over to the Pentagon is there are rumors abound that the majority of cameras that day that would overlook the Pentagon, security cameras, were turned off that day, except for the one that just so-called happened to catch the jet, which they've only showed us still pictures from, and from a hotel.
Yeah.
Now, according to many experts, including the pilots group for 9/11 Truth, that in order for this amateur pilot to make that connection with the Pentagon, with a 757, he would have had to do a high G turn at about 580 nautical miles an hour, and then bring that aircraft and hold it still within 6 feet of the ground. The wings would have clipped, or were said to have clipped, light standards that fell across the highway and then crashed it perfectly into the Pentagon, even though the Pentagon shows nothing in regards to any wing clippings ripping through the building, unlike the Twin Towers, which shows the wings going in. This leads me to believe that, and this is my opinion, I don't believe for a second a plane hit the Pentagon. Number one, if the wings at that speed would have hit those light standards that would have been bolted to cement blocks, it would have sheared the wings, which would have sent the aircraft into the ground. Number two, the fact that there was no wing markings on the Pentagon, like I just stated, really makes me wonder whether or not it was actually a plane or some sort of handheld launched missile that blew it up.
Uh-huh.
What is your theory of what happened there?
Well, extending a little bit your analysis, I think one of my favourite, if that's the right word, pieces of evidence about this is the photographs the following day of the Pentagon and the beautiful, immaculate green grass lawns that extend away from the crash site back towards the road and beyond. You know, we're told to believe that 757 screamed across that lawn 4 feet above it at 500 miles an hour without singeing the grass or disrupting anything at all. Yeah, it's quite clear, and this isn't being conspiratorial at all, or being a truther, or being a 9/11 this or that. This is the other thing, you see. If it had been a planned inside event and they had used autopilot to take over the planes and fly them to a particular spot, pre-designated spot using GPS coordinates, then the safest thing to do, the easiest thing to do would be to do that. Fly the plane into the Pentagon. You know, forget about the hijackers and forget about the flight path and the flight plan, because of course if we had the black boxes we would know that didn't happen. That's maybe one reason some people think we've never found the flight boxes. But I think it's quite clear that an aircraft didn't crash into the Pentagon. Flight 77 didn't, and something did, but Flight 77 didn't. And that's the worry, isn't it, a little bit? So therefore, where is it, and where are all the passengers, and what happened to them? You know, that's the most sinister thing. Because if they were going to be taken away and killed, as some people say, they were all gassed on the plane and thrown out into the sea and the planes were deliberately crashed into the sea at a later date with all the passengers were already dead, etc., then why didn't they just crash it into the Pentagon? Why make up this big elaborate lie and then fire a handheld missile into the Pentagon for whatever reasons? Why don't they just do it as they said they did? The truth is, the fact is that there's no evidence. It's another one of those occasions where we're told to believe that there's been an aircraft crash, and yet there's no evidence of any aircraft anywhere. No wings, no tail, no engines. Those 25-foot Rolls-Royce engines that you can stand up in that are made out of titanium, well, they've gone. They're not there anymore, 2 of them. Pentagon swallowed them up, did they? Burned up in a fire. It's just not true.
Well, here's the interesting part to that. Dr. James Fetzer, who's been on this show to talk 9/11, has stated 2 things. Number one, he stated that there was a C-130 Hercules seen flying around the Pentagon at this time when all aircraft are supposed to be grounded, and there were people reporting that they were seeing things fall out of that C-130.
Right.
Also, one of the pieces of the 757 that was recovered on the grass seemed to have some sort of branch on it that Fetzer believes that came from a 757 crash in the Amazon, because the plant was that was seen on that piece was native only to South America. Did you hear about that?
Yeah, but also this is further evidence of what I've mentioned several times now about remembering your first reaction, remembering what you first heard, remember what you were first told, what you first saw. And I'm talking specifically about the man who approached Dan Rather, the black guy with the white shirt, saying, "Oh, there was no plane. What are you talking about, plane? I didn't see a plane. There was a bomb, man. It was a bomb. There's no plane." Talking about that. I'm also talking about the fact that after then, there was no evidence at all of any aircraft to be found at the Pentagon. Nothing. 1 or 2 days later, a couple of days later, they started revealing pictures of pieces that seemed to have been placed around the plane. You're talking about one of the pieces. They seem to have recovered. I mean, if you look at later photographs, you can see that there are some aircraft. Some of the people listening may have just heard what I said and said to themselves, "Well, that's not true. I've seen a photograph with a part of an aeroplane outside the Pentagon." Yeah, you have. That photograph was released a week later, 3 or 4 days later. Remember what you saw at the time. Go back to the original footage. You can find it on YouTube as well. There is footage from CNN and Fox News and other news organisations of. It's not very clear, I have to admit, but you can see the crash zone and the building smoking, and even there's some footage of before. If you remember, the hole went in and then the building collapsed a few hours later. I'm going to come back to that in a second, actually. In fact, I'll come back to it right now. But this hole, and then the building collapsed a little bit later, and then there's footage of this. Well, look around. Look around the grass. Yeah, there's fire engines parked there. There's this and that. There's people milling about. There's all sorts. There's ambulances there. There's no airplane there. There's no aircraft parts there. And now you think back to the photographs you saw, and there was a part of a tail and a part of the wing, and then think to yourself, well, why aren't they in the original shot? Why aren't they there? Did somebody find it inside the building and drag it out and put it on the front lawn to be photographed? Maybe. Why aren't they there? And going back to, as I said, I'm going to come straight back to it. If you look at pictures of that hole, after the wall had collapsed, that's what just reminded me when I mentioned that. After the wall had collapsed, go and look at some photographs of that hole. You can find them all over the internet and all over in all sorts of books and all sorts of. Look at the photograph of that hole. You'll find directly where the walls come down on the left-hand side, you'll see an exposed office. And it looks pretty weird, eh? There's a chair there, there's a table there. I think there might be a computer there. There's a book on the table. Right next to it, it's the first piece that is within a foot of where the building has fallen down. So, in other words, part of it's fallen away and exposed, like almost when you open a doll's house. You imagine? You've got these offices there, and the partitions are still there, and the wallpaper's on the wall, and there's a picture on the wall, and there's a book on the desk. Well, why weren't they incinerated like the World Trade Center 7? Building 7? from fire? Why weren't they incinerated like the two buildings at World Trade Centers 1 and 2? If that fire from that aviation fuel was hot enough to bring down Trade Centers 1 and 2, melt steel into molten lava that ran through the basement that all the firefighters gave evidence that they saw, why didn't it burn that book? How did that desk survive and the chair? Looks like you've just peeled back the front layer of a doll's house and you've got all these rooms with all these things, a waste paper bin and an office and a desk and a chair. Go and have a look at the photographs and ask yourself, if that was the same thing as went into World Trade Centers 1 and 2, into a building, which is the best evidence you can get, and incinerated the plane and the aircraft and the engines, why did that book survive? How is that desk there? Wooden desk. It's not true, is it? It isn't. Look at it for yourself. Look at the evidence. I don't have the answers as to why, who did it, what was the reason. I do know that the 9/11 report is not the truth. That's the conspiracy, because of the evidence that is inconsistent with what we can see for ourselves. We don't need somebody with a greater mind and a greater experience and a greater investigative capacity and more money and a bigger budget to tell us this. You can see it for yourself. There's no scorch mark. There were no air on the grass. There were no aeroplane parts prior to 2 days afterwards when some turned up. There were people saying, man, that wasn't a plane, that was a bomb. They were saying it live to the news camera reporter. And there's a desk and a piece of book and a paper and a wallpaper and a perfectly preserved that wasn't incinerated with the same intensity that we're told brought down World Trade Centers 1 and 2. Ask yourself why.
What about the idea that the day before at the Pentagon, Donald Rumsfeld was preparing his notes to try and answer why $2.3 trillion in defense budget spending had gone missing. And apparently the accountants section were in that refurbished section, which was under construction when it was hit. And all the files were lost on that $2.3 trillion.
As happened at World Trade Center 7, with the huge investigations going on into financial irregularities that involved Rumsfeld as well, or one of his companies. Was it Halliburton?
Halliburton is Dick Cheney's.
Oh, okay. In that case, that's who I'm thinking of. But let's try and avoid some sort of libel suit here. I'm going from memory. But there were some pretty serious investigations going on in some of these companies where all of the evidence was being stored and preserved and sifted through at World Trade Center 7. And as I said earlier, all that evidence was lost and the investigations were closed, oddly enough, through lack of evidence. And this involved billions of pounds, by the way, billions of dollars, by the way, billions of dollars. And yeah, and you mentioned the Rumsfeld thing. It's another one of those same things. None of it conclusive evidence, all of it circumstantial, all of it pointing in one direction. And when asked the question, when I start talking about things like that, when asked the question, so you think it was an inside job then, do you? You think Bush was involved? Actually, I don't. I don't think George Bush had anything. I don't think he knew anything about it. I think there were darker forces working around him, whether this was connected to Saudi Arabia, as is suggested, or whether this was connected to Israel, has been suggested, and where a lot of the evidence points, or whether Cheney and Rumsfeld were involved somewhere along the line. I know they were close to Bush in a professional capacity, but not necessarily personal. I think George Bush's reactions looked fairly genuine. I think he looked shocked. Go and look at the evidence. There's lots of talk about how he sat there at that school reading that book and he had advanced knowledge and knew what was going on. I don't believe he knew anything. I don't think it was an inside job that involved Bush whatsoever. I thought he knew nothing about it. I think he was as shocked as everybody else. He might know more now than he's prepared to admit. But I believe there are darker forces working around him, may not even be connected to his Republican Party. The Democrats have got some pretty dark forces going on in there as well, haven't they? So yeah, I think when it comes to waving things off as it's just an inside job. Yeah, maybe, but it doesn't necessarily involve the American administration at that time. They don't necessarily knew anything about it, in terms of the president, I mean.
So do you believe then with the Pentagon that we are talking about a bomb, or are we talking about some sort of handheld cruise missile? Maybe a Hellfire missile or something along those lines that can do maximum damage?
It's hard to believe that without believing that information isn't very well known. I mean, in other words, if you accept that it wasn't an aircraft, which I think most people do, most people with a functioning brain and an inquisitive intellect, if you like, accept now that there was no aeroplane. Because if so, where is it? I think most people accept that now, regardless of the darker implication as to what happened to it and where are the passengers, and then you go off on your what really happened, let's get answers trip. So you accept that there was no plane at the Pentagon, then you have to accept that it was obviously some kind of missile or explosive device, but in which case the details are very well known. Not by us, of course, but the investigative forces at the Pentagon and the US military, they know what happened. They know who did it. They know who held it. They know where it was fired from. They're just not telling us. Maybe we shouldn't know. Maybe there is a bigger picture here and we don't need to know. But again, that points to the 9/11 Commission report as a fake document, doesn't it? It can only mean that. It can only mean that the conclusions they've published, they know are not true. Can't be any other explanation.
Well, if it was a missile, it would have had to have one heck of a strong warhead to be one of those, what do they call them, bunker buster type missiles. That's that right. Can go through, 5 to 6 rows of concrete, thick concrete.
Yep. And therefore, by definition, that wasn't fired from the back of a passing van, was it? In a mobile, it was obviously some kind of military launcher. It wasn't something that, as you mentioned earlier, handheld. I know you didn't mean that literally. It wasn't something that was fired from the window of a passing lorry. It was something that there would be evidence of. There would be evidence left, whether it was fired from 100 meters away or 10 kilometers away. Which is the other thing, by the way. That's another. You've got to remember most countries, Britain certainly, and America, have got capabilities with these missiles that can be fired from 1,000 kilometers away with quite accurate results. They can put them through the window of a building from 1,000 kilometers away. So it doesn't necessarily mean it was fired from across the forecourt from the other side of that petrol station, gas station.
One of our guests in the chat room, Trip, actually just put a website out that shows the fire burning out of a very small hole, and the fire is taken from the highway where the light standard is standing.
Where the light standard is standing?
Yes. And this was a new release of photos, I believe, from, let me see, released by the FBI.
Right. Well, if everything we've talked about is pause for thought, is provocative enough to have another think about what happened on September the 11th, then we also, by definition, I think, have to accept that pretty much anything that we're told by the FBI is probably not to be relied on. Especially in terms of evidence, photographic evidence. What's the website address? Can we look at that now?
The website address, let me grab it here, is, I just got to scroll back, heavy.com/news/2017. It's actually
2017 big numbers, yeah?
Yeah. 2017/03/ the full word September -11 -the Pentagon Are you still with me?
Yeah, is there no link of it from the front page? I'm on the front page.
No, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to send this link over to you via Skype. How about that, instead of reading it all out? I don't know why I just didn't think about that. I'll send it to you via Skype right there.
Well, on the front page, they've got September 11 attacks. Well, let's not get distracted by too much about it. You tell me, are they interesting? What do they tell us?
Well, the first photograph is very interesting because in the videos that they showed leading up to that there was the light standards on the highway were knocked down. This one light standard, which is clearly right by the burning. So if you look on Skype, if you go into our Skype chat, you'll see the photo right there.
Hopefully, I don't disconnect us.
So what it looks like is we have a light standard standing up, and yet we were told that the light standards leading up to where the entrance point of the Pentagon were all knocked down from the wings.
Oh, I see what you mean. Well, okay. They weren't all knocked down, were they? I mean, are we sure he's on the right flight path? There are two possible flight paths. No one's actually confirmed which one the plane is supposedly taken. There was one that was directly across the road that knocked some down, and there are other witness testimony. There's one particular taxi driver that said that the plane came right across in front of him and knocked the light pole straight through his window, and there's a picture of his cab with a light post sticking out of it. There's all sorts of conflicting evidence about that and those light posts. I think there's a lot of there's a few red herrings there in terms of the photograph evidence that came from around the Pentagon. But it's another interesting that you made the point earlier. I don't know if we picked up on it, but sure, the Pentagon is possibly the most heavily defended and certainly heavily monitored building in the history of buildings. You know, never has there been a building that's been more protected or more secure, you would think. And yet there is no photographic evidence other than what you just say has been released by the FBI, which I wouldn't regard as reliable 16 years later. But no video, no monitoring. You know, there have been so many questions raised about Flight 77. So many people like myself and yourself are saying there was no plane. You know, the pilots are saying that the plane could not have crashed into that building. The architects are saying that there was no aircraft, evidence of any aircraft at that building. So if there was photographic evidence or something that could shut us all up with one or two press releases or one or two YouTube videos or one or two stories, why haven't they? Why haven't they? Why haven't they provided this evidence that they must have? You know, okay, 90 of the 92 cameras around the Pentagon weren't working that day. Really? That sounds to me like the sort of thing the police say in Bangkok when there's been a robbery. The CCTV cameras in that area don't work. Everyone laughs and says, okay, well, the police were in on that then. You know? It's just not true, is it? It's nonsense. It's third world nonsense to try and tell us that 88 of the 90 cameras around the Pentagon happened to be not working on the 7th of September. How stupid are we not to question this?
I fully agree with you in regards to that. We need to question it. We need to question it a lot.
Well, you and I are.
No, absolutely we are. Absolutely.
There should be an awful lot more of that as well, I think. Which is why, in the book, and which is why constantly whenever I'm asked, I am calling for a new inquiry. You know, in inverted commas, a real inquiry, because we haven't had one. You know, we can go back over just some of the things we've talked about now, the Larry Silverstein, the pullet, the advanced knowledge of the Twin Towers, the camera that was focused way out to the right, kilometres off, that suddenly managed to pick up the dark shadow of the second aircraft into the World Trade Center. Who knew something was coming and from what direction? Who rigged World Trade Center 7 with explosives to pull it, as Larry Silverstone called it, which is a well-known demolition term. You know, who believes that Larry Silverstein himself told them to pull it? Really? Told who? Who believes that the owner of a building as important as World Trade Center 7, that is housed the FBI, FEMA, the New York Emergency Team, the CIA, the Secret Service, that would have been bomb-proof, blast-proof, anthrax-proof, air-proofed, would have been every proof? Who believes that the oil tank in the basement punctured and caused a fire 5 floors up to the curtains of an office building? Who believes that? Who believes this nonsense? This is the official version. You know, and once we've agreed or we've decided, well, we don't, okay, the next step is to ask or to try and find out what did happen, who's responsible, and what the truth is, and what the story is. Maybe we don't need to know, maybe we shouldn't know, maybe it's too horrible to even think about. It certainly seems it in some parts in terms of the planes and the passengers that were on the so-called planes, because this is the logical extension of what we're talking about right here with the Pentagon. Very few people believe that anything crashed into the Pentagon that involved passengers, but we all know that Flight 77 had quite a lot of people on board who are no longer alive, well, presumably no longer alive. So if that plane didn't crash into the Pentagon, and there's no evidence of a plane crashing into the Pentagon, then where are they all? What happened to them? It certainly would explain the telephone calls that were supposed to have been received by family members and loved ones of the passengers on that flight, because those telephone calls weren't made whilst the flight was in the air. Here's another very small detail that few people ever think about. Those aircraft at that time didn't have what are called airphones. We all now have an airphone that's in the little console, if you like, that's in the arm of the chair that you can pick it up, swipe your credit card through and make a phone call from the airphone. Cell phones still don't work at 30,000 feet. Cell phones are proven not to work above, I was watching a test on it just the other day, I think it's 5,000 feet. They took all these different cell phones from these different airtime providers up into a small light aircraft in a built-up area, an urban area, so there would have been aircraft towers, transmitters, and they could make phone calls at 1,000, 2,000. It broke up at 3,000. Anyway, you can't make a phone call above 5,000 feet. So anybody that's saying that Barbara Olson phoned her husband to tell her that the plane had been hijacked, as the official report tells us, minutes after the hijackers took control of Flight 77, is lying. She did not use her cell phone to phone her husband, who happened to be the US Solicitor General, funny that, in the Bush administration, Ted Olson. It's not true. Yet Ted Olson, the US Solicitor General, wants you to believe that that's true, because that's the evidence that he gave. And then he changed his story. He then said, no. When it was pointed out that cell phones didn't work above a certain number of feet, he then changed his story and said, no, she used one of the airphones. So we go back and look at the models of the aircraft that Flight 77 was, and guess what? There were no airphones on those planes. They didn't have them. And even if they did, because they were introduced later than 2001, you can't make what they call a call-collect telephone call. Ted Olson says that his evidence is, the US Solicitor General, that his wife Barbara Olson phoned his office and made a call-collect. In other words, the operator put it through and he paid for it. Even when airphones were introduced onto those aircraft, you couldn't do that. Everybody knows who's flown in an aircraft, who's used one of those phones. You swipe your credit card through and that gives you a connection. You don't get a connection until you do that. You don't make call-collect phone calls. You don't phone an operator and ask her to charge the other person at the other end. But Ted Olson, the US Solicitor General, is on record, and it's information released in the 9/11 Commission report, that that's what happened after he changed his story when he realised that you couldn't make cell phone calls at that altitude. Okay, so it brings about the next question. What happened to those people? This is the really sinister one. Where is that plane? Where are all the passengers? It didn't fly into the building, into the Pentagon. So what happened to them? That's what I'd really like. That's what the inquiry should be about.
Heading over to Shanksville, where where it is just a giant hole in the ground. In your book, 9/11 Conspiracy, you have a very, very interesting conversation that Fox News had between two of their journalists about Flight 93.
Okay.
And basically, the reporter is saying there's nothing but a hole in the ground. No debris, nothing.
Right. This is going back to, again, and I'm repeating it deliberately because I want to drive the point home, is to listening to the first information you get. The first time you see it, the first time you hear about it, the first reports you get, the first photographs you see, before they've had a chance, before they've been changed to fit a narrative, to suit somebody's a particular narrative, whatever that is. And you're absolutely right. There are exchanges on record, and you can see them again on YouTube, of reporters saying they've been to the crash site and there's nothing there. You know, there are other witnesses, locals, who are on record, and you can see YouTube interviews with them. And what we're trying to do here is go into too much. You don't need that much proof. We're trying to go into too much proof here and say, look, I can name this person. This is what using Occam's razor to shave away everything that's not relevant to get to the known facts. Let's not try and use too much proof. Sure, there are lots of witness statements. All the proof you need is to look at that hole, of which the photographs have been released, and ask yourself, if you've ever seen on Air Crash Investigation, the TV show, or any other research that you might have done in the history and the course of your life, of an air crash into the ground, not into a building. Okay, forget the idea that in an enclosed space we're told that 2 aircraft can be vaporized into nothing in World Trade Centers 1 or 2. That's what you're told. Believe that, don't believe that, that's up to you. Have you ever seen an aircraft hit the ground and disappear? That's all the evidence you need from Flight 93. Sure, there's lots of witness evidence. Yeah, we can go through it for the next hour and read out everything that everybody said at the time. The first reports, the first responses. People coming back from the site saying there's nothing there. There's just bits of paper floating around. There's just a hole in the ground. There's nothing there. Lots of people are saying this. Wally the coroner said the same thing. He told Fox News and NBC, the actual coroner, that it ceased being an investigation the moment he got there. You can look at other evidence about Flight 93. There's a guy on board. It's apparently, this is from the Let's Roll movie, for your listeners who are familiar with some of it. The famous passengers took over the aircraft and flew it down into the ground to prevent it hitting the, it was either the White House or the Capitol building, wasn't it? They apparently were targeting for. And one of the guys, it's on the transcript, it's in the report, it's in the 9/11 Commission report. One of the guys on board, Mark Bingham, his name was, apparently made a phone call on the airphones that we know didn't exist on the aircraft, or from a cell phone that we know didn't work above 5,000 feet. Made a phone call to his mother. And the transcript of the phone call went, "Hi Mum, it's me, Mark Bingham." Now, I don't know about you, but whoever phoned their mum up and said, "Hi Mum, it's Mark Bingham?" I think most people would phone their mum up and say, "Hey Mum, it's me." Who gives their first and last name? It's not true. We don't need to investigate much further than the fact that no plane hit the ground. There's a different story, a different narrative. What it is, we don't know. It's what we need more investigation for. We need to be telling the truth.
One of the claims, Albert, is that the plane disappeared into old abandoned mine shafts. It just happens to be a little too surreal. You know what I'm saying? Too easy.
Well, and one of the other explanations as well at the time was that it was very marshy and boggy ground, not unlike the Everglades, if you like. And so once it had penetrated the surface, it just was swallowed up into the soft, boggy marshland. That was another implausible explanation that was given at the time, along with the mineshaft one. But the mineshaft one is the best one, because in which case, great, go get the plane. You know where it is then. Go get it, bring it out, reconstruct it in a big aircraft hangar. like they do on air crash investigation, and show us the evidence. If it went into a mine shaft, one thing's for certain is that they know where the black boxes are. You know? So again, you question. Sometimes we're told things that are so implausible that you just think, you know, someone's having fun with us here. Someone's just pulling our tail and saying, let's be as out. It's like the John Lennon and the I Am the Walrus story again. Let's be so outrageous here. Let's see who buys it. Let's see how much time people spend on poring all over this before they realise we're just making it up.
So what do you think happened with Shanksville to make this a so-called fourth aircraft?
What I think happened to Shanksville is entirely different to what I think happened with the others. Sadly, I think that Shanksville was either a real hijack or was a real, might have been the only one, or it might have been a real suspected hijack. But I think Shanksville, I think Flight 93 was shot down.
And where would it have been shot down?
Well, they're not going to ever tell us that, are they? They're not going to ever tell us where it is or if it was shot down, we would know why. We know because they suspected that it was en route for the White House and or Capitol Hill in Washington, and therefore it needed to be shot down and should be shot down. By the way, there were 2 other or 3 other examples of whatever was going on that day had already happened. The Pentagon and the 2 at the World Trade Centers. You know, I'm pretty sure. In my hometown in London, if there were 3 aircraft that just hit some key parts of London, if there was a 4th one on its way, I pretty sure as hell hope that the RAF shoot it down over Kent or over the countryside somewhere. Tragic as that is, and as horrible as that is for the people on board, that's what I think happened to that one. I think it was shot down, and the cover-up of that would be quite understandable, I think. That's why we haven't been given proper information and more details. Probably why a movie was made, to deflect about that one and that one alone, was to deflect everybody's attention away from it. Let's invent some real American heroes instead. That's what Hollywood does. That's why you can't believe anything Hollywood says either.
It almost seems like it's a little too scripted.
Right, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, hi Mum, it's Mark Bingham. Really? When did you last phone your mum and give her your first and last name? I know that's a small thing. I know that's a small detail. It's one of thousands of small things that you look at, as you've said several times yourself. Just doesn't make sense. People don't react like this. People don't do things like that. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense that 2 people, at least, that I've seen interviewed, can walk down from the 83rd floor past the burning fire on the 73rd floor that was so hot it brought down the World Trade Center, and yet they survived without a singe. It doesn't explain how that passport survived that you mentioned earlier. There are too many small things that just don't make sense whichever way you look at it. They just don't make sense to the point where you can fairly confidently say, do you know what, I don't think that happened. I don't believe that. I don't believe that this little old lady with her hands cuffed behind her back and the bullet wound in her head committed suicide. You know, you have enough evidence to make your own call. You don't need experts and expensive inquiries. You can say just from what you can see on your own PC or from reading my book or from watching YouTube. And of course, you know, on YouTube and on the internet, there are lots of things that you do need to siphon away. As you mentioned earlier, I don't know if we were on air or off air at the time, but you mentioned that the theory that some of these aircrafts that crashed were holograms, into the World Trade Center because of the footage that we have. No, I don't really believe that either. I think there's some conspiracy theory nutters out there, but don't let that stop you from believing the rest of us who have some more cohesive and bigger questions and better evidence than it was a hologram. You understand?
Absolutely, I understand. I fully understand.
Don't judge us all by the lowest common denominator. There's some better evidence out there that you should be questioning.
So, out of everything we have talked about tonight, Albert, as we go into the final 10 minutes of this show,
already,
what? Yeah, flown by. What have we missed that we need to question that maybe hasn't been so much in the public eye?
Well, I've mentioned it a few times, and I'm sure other people have thought of it before, but I think one of the key things is the amount of times where we have evidence of what I'm calling advanced knowledge. Now, whether that's just the single shot that I mentioned earlier of the blue sky, somebody's looking out to the right of the World Trade Center building, it's not even in shot. Who does that? You know, the World Trade Center is burning right in front of you. Look out of your window now and imagine you can see the World Trade Center and the top of it's on fire. Who then looks 15 kilometers to the right and points his camera out there at nothing in particular until eventually an airplane comes into view and he's then able to track that into the second building? The dancing Israelis who are on top of the van. The explosives that were clearly rigged into Building 7. Again, I've gone into great detail as to why I don't think it's an issue that might have been a controlled demolition. So what? Good. Maybe the right thing to do. Hands up. We brought the building down. It's evidence of advanced knowledge. Something was happening. Someone knew that something was going on that day. It's the guy that managed to get one truck every 3.5 minutes in to clear World Trade Center 7's 350,000 tons of steel and debris out within 90 minutes. He had a truck every 3 minutes. Who coordinated that? That's advanced knowledge. There's too much of that. That's the big thing we've missed. Forget all there are so many conspiracy theories and there's so much nonsense been written and said about 9/11. You tend to look at half of it and say, well, all of that's crap or rubbish or whatever your word is. So I'm not going to believe all of that either. It's almost like so much information and so many theories have been put out there that one of direct answer to your question, one of the things we're missing is to consider the people that had advanced knowledge, because clearly people did. And in which case, where did they get that from and what was the plan? Because advanced knowledge is evidence of intent.
Do you think that it'll ever come out as to what the real story is?
It's interesting that one of Donald Trump's campaign promises was that he would get to the bottom of it. I remember him. I remember watching a clip of him on some news show or anyway, some campaign speech he did, when he actually said in his inimitable way, he said, "You know about 9/11, huh? We all know about 9/11, huh? We want to get to the bottom of that. I promise you, we'll be getting to the bottom of that." The thing about changing the subject only slightly in a connected way about prospective presidents or people that are... Trump gets a lot of criticism for some of the things he hasn't done that he promised to do. The difference between running for the office of president and being president is massive. I mean, you can promise all sorts of things because you don't really have full knowledge of events. And 9/11 is the particular example I'm giving here. And when you get into office and you're suddenly the president and you're then given the briefings and you're given the information, it's quite easy to see how you would then read this and think, oh Christ, no wonder no one said anything. I can't reveal this. Do you see what I mean? In the sense that the motive and the events were so horrible and so sinister that Trump has gone quiet on it. Trump promised us on one of his campaign speeches that he would get to the bottom of 9/11 and he would let us know what happened and release documents. Even Wikipedia haven't been able to release that much, and they're not normally wrong about anything in the last 10 years. So there's every suspicion that Trump then gets into office and the first thing he says, like I would as president, right, give me all the detail, give me a briefing on 9/11, what was all that about? Listens to the evidence, listens to the truth, and then thinks, oh Christ, I can't tell anybody about this. You know? And this is true of a lot of campaign promises and always has been with US presidents. They always say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'll say that, I'll do this. They get behind that desk, they get the briefing, and then think, oh Christ, now I know, I realise why we can't release this information publicly. So in answer to the question is no, I doubt it.
We got about 4.5 minutes left with you, Tim, Albert, before we have to wrap this up.
Okay.
Take some time to give us your overview of what happened that day and who is responsible.
I don't have one. It's very quick, and I'm at pains to point this out in the book. I didn't write the book 9/11 Conspiracy so that I could give everybody the answers and make up some new theory and point everybody in a particular direction. It's why we call it No Fake News and Just Facts, because I don't have any better idea of what happened on that day than you or anybody else. What I would, taking you back to something I said earlier, as if I was going to do this in my most sinister days, and I was sitting here stroking my cat in true James Bond villain style, and I was going to take on the Western world, then I would do it like this, and I would do it through using GPS autopilots on passenger jets, and I would crash the passenger jets into the buildings, and therefore you can have a proper inquiry, albeit without the black boxes, because you wouldn't want that evidence coming out. Instead, you'd make up a story about hijackers, which is another thing that's not true, because again, it's in my book and I can't remember it offhand or remember the names offhand, but at least 4 of those so-called hijackers that are still on the FBI website as listed as being the 19 that carried out those attacks are still alive. Still alive and working somewhere in the Middle East. One's a doctor, the other one is a pilot somewhere, an actual real pilot. Again, begs another question. So why would he go to pilot training school to learn how to, blah, blah, blah. So I think my overall conclusion is that we know that the 9/11 Commission report is inconsistent with the evidence that we can see ourselves. We don't need expensive inquiries. We don't need, you and me, just us normal people. We don't need expensive inquiries and hearings and listen to Congress and employ investigators. We can see for ourselves that a lot of this that's in the 9/11 Commission report just isn't true. It's inconsistent with what we know is true. So there needs to be another inquiry. What did happen? Well, we know what did happen. Everybody saw what happened. Why and how? I don't want to speculate. It's not fair to speculate. There are all sorts of speculations. One of them is that Larry Silverstein called it all in himself because there was asbestos in World Trade Centers 1 and 2, and the New York Port Authority had ordered him to, after he'd bought it, the buildings, to carry out multi-million-dollar refurbishment to take all the asbestos out of the 2 buildings. So therefore, he alone coordinated the attacks to get the buildings demolished so that he didn't have to pay for it. Now, that sounds crazy, doesn't it? But it's one of the theories. Why is it any more crazy than any of the others?
As we look to wrap this up here in about 30 seconds, please tell everybody your website, your books, where they can be found, because you're more than just a man who's talking about 9/11.
My website is albertjack.com. It can be found from anywhere. albertjack.com, that's the 2 boys' names. And the book is 9/11 Conspiracy, so you can find that in the book section of albertjack.com. Or you can find me on Facebook, Twitter. Everything's Albert Jack. Just Google Albert Jack and you'll find me wherever you're looking for me. And I look forward to it.
Well, besides the one little Twitter or make that Skype snafu, we got through this one, my friend.
Very good, huh? I thoroughly enjoyed it. I can't believe 3 hours has flown by.
I know. Way too fast. Way too fast. Thank you so much once again, Albert, for being on Spaced Out Radio. It's always a pleasure to have you on the air with us, my friend.
Pleasure's all mine. Anytime.
All right. You hold on. I'm going to wrap this thing up. I want to say once again thank you to Albert for being our guest, talking about 9/11 on the anniversary. And once again, this isn't about trying to upset people about that day. It's about bringing facts together. The most important thing that happened on 9/11 is over 2,977 people, innocent people, died that day. That's who we care about. Their families, their friends, their children, their spouses. Tomorrow night on the program, Stanton Friedman, Frank Fascino. We are talking the 70th anniversary of the Flatwoods Monster. This is a continuance from our program just a couple of months ago with Frank. It's going to be great. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. I want to thank my team, Everett Thiemer and Eric Markham from The Encounter Online, Tim Doyle and Jolene Lammers, web design, Catherine James, social media, Bob Davis, our great announcer, Kim Gandy, our director of business management, and, of course, LMC Media out of Toronto, Leslie Mitchell-Clark, taking care of our press as well. But most of all, we say thank you to all of you in the chat rooms, on Twitter, hanging out with me, asking some great questions. With one of those rare nights I didn't get to any questions, I promise I will tomorrow night. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for spreading the word, because together, my friends, with your help, we own the night. We will talk to you in exactly 21 hours from now. Thank you so much for tuning us in. Everything at spacedoutradio.com. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Have a good one.